Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, it's
Andrew.
Monday, and welcome to Andrew Talks to Awesome People, and also SoundFlow live stream webinar thing. We are live on all of the PureMix channels and all the SoundFlow channels. We're everywhere. We're absolutely everywhere tonight. And my guest on his own channels, Christian, and I'm going to make you say your own last name.
Scheuer.
I don't even know how to begin to try and replicate that, so I'm not going to.
Start with 5 tequila shots, then it's going to be
Okay.
easy.
All right. Some of the Mexican joint lube. Welcome. Very glad to have you on here. Christian
you.
and I have spent quite a bit of time over the last couple of years talking about SoundFlow and other things and whatever. And we are here to celebrate the release of SoundFlow 5, which came out on Thursday, if I am correct.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's been a long time coming too. A lot of work went into this release.
Yeah, not at least from all of our behind the scenes people like yourself, all of our beta testers that I haven't had the chance to publicly say thank you to yet. So here it goes.
Nice. Yeah, the stats on like how many features and how many lines of code and that it's astounding. It is a gigantic release.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it was. I don't even remember it. It's something like 80,000 lines of code that we changed. And I think we have like 500 bugs in the queue that are waiting to get triaged or fixed somehow. So I think there are over 40 new features that we added. Some really, really big and changing core parts of the program, stuff that we've been wanting to do for years, to address feedback from our users and also to get ready for some of the plans we have for the future, and some small features as well. And yeah, there was a lot to do. We're happy to finally have it out.
Yeah, excellent. So look, before we get specifically into SoundFlow 5, normally this is when I say we're going to go in the Wayback Machine, and I start making people explain when they started playing tambourine at the age of 3 and how that led to a career in doing whatever. We don't have to go quite that far back, but I would love to get a little backstory as to why SoundFlow even exists, and then we'll very quickly get up to the point of what SoundFlow is now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm educated as a film sound designer. I started wanting to be a rock musician at 20. So not going way too deeply into that story, but I think like anybody else ending up working in the film industry doing sound, they usually come from music, and I did as well. And so way back, it feels to me at least more than 10 years ago, in 2011, I started in film school. And one of the first things I noticed was I wasn't as quick as I thought I was. Um, and I found myself having to click on the preview button all the time. And so for those who work in music, when you do film work, you essentially have an hour and a half of stuff that you need to work on. So you use automation extensively. Essentially, you automate every single parameter of every single plugin in your session, and you might have like 300 tracks. So there's a lot to automate. And so if I wanted to change the setting of an EQ on a specific part of a sentence, that's sort of the detail level you go to for film, you would have to like ensure preview is engaged, go over to click on the right plugin, usually an insert one like the EQ or something, open it up, make the changes, then find right automation to selection, then go back and click OK on the automation warning that you needed to keep engaged, on the off chance that you would have accidentally written to the whole session. All these things you need to actually read what it says in that warning. Otherwise, you can't click OK.
I seem to remember they're rather cryptic warnings too.
Yeah, and just like I'm telling the story now, but that's where your mind would go because you had to look at the screen whenever you do something with your mouse. It sort of takes your attention away from what you were doing. And I mean, just by telling the story, I'm almost forgetting what I wanted to say, which was I had to click all these buttons to do one simple thing. And in the course of a whole movie full of dialogue, you're doing that 10,000 times. And so if I need to click 25 times per thing I want to do, it really adds up. And it made me slow. And I felt like the computer was stealing my focus and my creative energy. And I got distracted way too much. So I tested out some solutions that were available at the time. I found what I thought was the best thing I could find at the time, and you could see it like slowly move the mouse for me and then click where it thought the automation window would be. And so if you'd hidden that or moved it, the click would fail and it would still think it did what it was supposed to do. So the automation just wasn't really working well, at least not what I could find. So I wrote my own little piece of software that I called just Pro Tools Shortcuts. And I had a company name back then, shouldn't dive into that. So yeah, it was just a utility I made for myself. And as I was in film school over the years, it developed. And by 2015, when I came out, I had this, sort of semi-final product that had 103 shortcuts for Pro Tools that I had designed and used over those 4 years. And they were designed so you could keep your left hand on the keyboard and your right hand on the mouse. And as much as possible, you wouldn't have to look at all these small buttons to accomplish simple things. And then there was a big important decision to make. I was coming out in the industry. I wanted to prove myself that I was able to do things quickly, or I needed some kind of edge to say, like, why should people hire me over my colleagues who are also coming out? And I debated really hard with myself. Should I make this into a product with everything that comes from that? Or should I just keep my edge? Like, this is something that makes me better
Your
from the
bionic arm.
competition.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was really in doubt because I felt like we could never make this into a product that would offset the lost revenue from all the films I wouldn't get. I could sell it for some minor some money to my colleagues, and then I would never get hired on a film again. Of course, that's not what happened. But so what really happened was I talked to a guy called Brian. So hi, Brian, if you're watching this, it's kind of fun. I've told this story many times. I'm not sure if you know this, but I remember you said to me, Brian asked me the question, so in 10 years, do you want to just feel good about yourself, sit in an ivory tower and feel like you're the shortcut master and nobody else really knows about it and hasn't made zero impact? Or do you want to create a global community of like-minded souls and meet sound designers and music producers from around the world? And I was like, I stop right there. Like, that's the thing I want to do.
Right.
So just to tell you that it really started as this wish to build a community where people could share, not just focus on how they could make their own workflows better. So I was at that fork. Should I just be selfish, or should I try to create something that where people can share? And there's a lot of people who didn't really believe in that at first, but I think you, for example, is great, a great testament to the fact that if people get engaged and really want to share. So we'll look into more of that later, I think.
Yeah. Well, but also you obviously had a pretty extensive coding background at that
Sure.
time. And you said, "Oh yeah, I just wrote myself a little program." Like,
Sorry.
it's a
Yeah,
little more than that.
we have a photo of me when I'm 3 or 4, where I sit in front of a computer, and I've been told that I started coding. My dad taught me a lot of things when I was young, and then I just really liked it. Yeah. So self-taught
Amazing. Well,
programmer. Yeah.
having spoken to you quite a bit over the last couple of years, it's astonishing how your mind works with code and the big picture of everything. And it's been, I mean, I feel like I've gotten a master's in computer science just in having conversations with you. So not that I could ever pass a test in anything, but anyway,
You've been a
all
great
right.
student. So
Well, thank you. So let's get to SoundFlow 5,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, so if we should stay a little bit just in like how did that evolve, we could just do quickly what went between SoundFlow 1 and 5.
Hmm.
And so the first version that came out was just strictly me telling people what to do, essentially, and you could say yes or no to each of the features. And then with SoundFlow 2, we had made it into a platform that was where there was a way for really technical people to write scripts. So it allowed people to do some form of customization, but it started with this core group of really techie, nerdy guys, a bit like myself. And so it was sort of like we were slowly building something that could become larger. It was also when we introduced our store where you could share scripts with each other. Then with SoundFlow 3, we added visual drag and drop macros. So that was again bringing SoundFlow to a larger audience that may not want to write scripts, but would actually want to automate something just by looking at sort of easy drag and drop macros. We'll take a look at that in a short while. And then SoundFlow 4 introduced the ability to use iPad apps or iPhone and Android devices to remote control stuff, and you can design those surfaces directly in SoundFlow. There's a lot more features along the way. Of course, we also integrated with Stream Decks and other hardware devices. But I think it tells the story of that we started with this really technical product that had a focus on enabling the most technical users to get work done. But we've also been slowly progressing towards making a product that's more easy to use for new users. And so we knew with all the feedback we've gotten over the past couple of years that we needed a big change this time. It wasn't enough to just keep adding small features. We needed to do a full release that focused on allowing a user who doesn't want to spend any time installing SoundFlow, essentially, because you're busy, and what we're selling you is an ability to work faster. So it's a
Yeah.
little bit annoying if you can only get there if you spend 2 weeks first setting it up. And I actually think that's what people spent before. So we worked really hard to bring a lot of changes to the core of the platform that together allow a user to set up SoundFlow 5 in just 6 minutes. And we designed a lot of ready-to-use content for Pro Tools so
Yeah.
that you don't even have to build your own content. So maybe that's a good time to start diving into that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um,
And we will be doing a Q&A at the end the way I always do. So if you've got questions, I think, Christian, you're monitoring your YouTube channel for comments at Facebook as well, or?
Yeah, I'll mostly be talking, but you should be able to watch it here on the stream
Yeah,
if you
the
have a comment.
easiest place to get questions in is the Crowdcast room for PureMix. And if you go to the PureMix website, just puremix.net, and then there's a link to it. But Mark is going to be monitoring that YouTube channel as well. So if you got questions, just you can put them in now, put them in later, whatever, and we'll get to them later on.
Yeah, exactly. So let me just move this window over and start sharing my screen so we can get started. Yep, that seemed to work. So actually what you see here is a little script I wrote to remote control StreamYard. That is the software we're using for this live stream. And let me just bring over my overhead camera here of my Stream Deck that I've connected. Right. So the big new thing that we have in SoundFlow 5 is that we have this new official Pro Tools integration that is a new package that comes pre-installed with SoundFlow 5, or you choose it as part of the quick setup guide that we have that I'll show you in a second. And as you can see here, it contains in total over 1,700 pre-built macros for Pro Tools and over 30 decks made for the 5x3 Stream Deck and over 80 decks in total. And so the main entry point for this is this Pro Tools main deck here that has some important groups of functionality: audio suite, automation, clips, colors, editing, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the major functionality that you would be wanting to control in Pro Tools has now been laid out for you here. And just if we quickly browse through this, how it looks inside SoundFlow, you can get a sense of all the work that has been done to create all these nice icons, and all the functionality behind each single button has been created for you. And in SoundFlow 4 and before that, you would have had to create all of this stuff yourself if you wanted it. So that's a massive change. You can also see if you browse through all of our functions here, every single macro that you can access has an icon. I think actually it's more like about 90% of them at this point, but we'll continue to make changes to this. And so if I just show you here how it would work inside Pro Tools, the minute I just move it down here, the minute I switch to Pro Tools, my Stream Deck automatically changed here. So now I can just browse through all these different functions and go into automation, go into the automation mode, toggle the preview state. That's where it started 10 years ago. So I can
There it
still do
is,
that.
and
Really
it's still
nice.
working.
Yeah, that's good. I can select a clip here, and let me just bring it over. Go ahead and change the clip color of that to something else, um, different color. And I can use these back buttons to navigate back to where I was before, which is really handy. I can do all sorts of MIDI-based processing here. We have these subfolders that you can also, navigate through. There are functions to control how you save files. I use this save session as new version quite a lot. It will augment the any number that you have at the end of your session file name, which just makes it really easy to do backups. And you can control the active state of groups. You can use our temp groups features here to quickly create a temp group and then delete it again if you want to make some automation changes to a group of tracks. You can open or close inserts on the select track. Another one of these things that I use to do all the time, and would have to click with your mouse here and then find that little red button to close it again. You don't
Yeah.
have to do that anymore. You can toggle the bypass state of inserts if you want to do that, and toggle the active state, and then just navigate quickly back out and find this whole layout there. So this is a massive, massive change. And to really show you how you get that, this is another core part of what was changed in SoundFlow 5. Is that so I took this is sort of a recording of our installation guide, and let me just make sure it doesn't have audio on. And so this is, you can see here, it's a 6-minute long recording of the installation process. And when you've got it installed, the first thing you're going to be met with is this quick start guide. And you'll just click next, and then choose which kind of integration that you want to use. So we've got a quick start guide that automatically can set it up with a Stream Deck device or any kind of mobile device that we support. So from iOS 10 and up, or I think it's Android 4 and up. But we have got a system requirements page with more details. So once you then select, in this installation guide, I'm using the Stream Deck. And throughout this demo that we're showing today, anything that you see here can be shown on an iPhone or iPad or Android device as well.
Or on the screen of your computer as well.
Oh yeah, exactly. I just find that slightly less useful, but so my personal taste, I really like the Stream Decks because they're physical. And so right now I'm actually looking at my computer screen, and I can just feel with my hand where these are. And I think the more you end up using them, that tactile feeling of where the button is can really, make you work faster. But of course, you don't have to purchase a Stream Deck device. You can also use any of the other types here. And you can even use MIDI devices. So they require a little bit more setup. And so once you go through here, this guide will show you how it all works. But essentially, you just click next and start and enter a password, etc. Click next again. And that's it. Then you're set up. And as you can see here behind the blurred stuff here, this setup that the quick start guide leaves you with is exactly the same setup that I have up here. So what I'll be demoing from here is an almost empty account that was just started. So I think these two things together, our new Pro Tools integration that has this tremendous amount of content, together with this quick start guide that helps you set it up correctly in just a few minutes, together they just make it really easy for new users to get started. And that was what we wanted.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a really simple thing. And to just point out, you were only about 4 minutes into that 6-minute video, and the Stream Deck was already set up, and you were at the SoundFlow screen.
Yeah, you can probably do it in 3, but I talk a lot, as you've already noticed. So yeah, I had to fit that into the video as well. Yeah, and then I think one more crucial aspect to this major new change was that whenever you want to access something that you're not creating yourself, we have our store in here that I always say it's somewhat mislabeled because 99% or something like that of the content is free if you have a SoundFlow subscription. So, But one of the problems we had with the store was that, a new user would come in and they would look through it and try to find good content to add. But we have over 350 packages in there, and it had become quite impossible to find the good quality. So what's new in SoundFlow 5 is that we have this navigation bar on the left, with a couple of important ways to sort through all this content. First, we've got the install packages here, which is a way to just see what you've already got installed, and you might uninstall some of those. You can look through here if there are any updates to what you've installed. Then under premium apps, we've got some of the premium apps that are made by SoundFlow developers. For example, made by Andrew.
Some guy. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Then we've got these new official SoundFlow integrations. One is the basics package, which has some basic functionality. I think we'll be making more videos to show how that works in the future. And the official Pro Tools integration, which now has all these new macros that we built. And the core new thing that we changed in SoundFlow 5 is that before, all this functionality was built into SoundFlow, into the core platform, but it's now a separate package, which means that we can, as a team, work on that more in parallel. And it also means we can push out updates to it irrespective of the main platforms. You'll see the Pro Tools integration is now version 107, and the SoundFlow version I'm running is 505. And so we have a lot of control over how to, perform these updates and hopefully fix bugs quicker, add features more quickly as well to that integration. And then to discover some of the best content made by users, we have this new staff picks section, to which I think we're going to be adding a lot more because there's so much quality content out there. But for example, we've got the Melodyne helpers from Andrew, and the session prep helpers here, and track data utilities by Chris Shaw, the TCO plugin loader by Kitch from SoundFlow. And so there's just, this is sort of the hand-picked best of the best that we think users could get really far with. A lot of users also requested some way to, figure out what's new, what has changed recently. Is there something I should be on the lookout for? You can find that under newest, and most popular is, what you would think. And then you can also sort by the app that you integrate with. So if you want something for Dolby Atmos, here there's a package from Andrew.
Hey,
So that was
some other
not intentional. But yeah, you've been busy, or something from Chrome. Finale. Oh, nothing for Finale yet. Let's hope it comes. For Logic, etc. And you can also sort by plugins or by technology, even by workflow, divided as film workflows and music workflows. And finally, you can find content by specific developer. So this should provide, together with all of the content that you just get that will just work, with our official integration, it should now also be easier to find content from the community.
Excellent. And there is a hell of a lot of content from the community, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the new user who has never used SoundFlow at all.
Got it.
And so they install, they get to the point where they have the Pro Tools package there. They've got the sample deck that will launch Finder, Safari, and Pro Tools. Right?
Yeah, let me just bring that up here. That's right. So the folder structure over here is maybe important to just clarify. So essentially, all these commands here, and so a command, all this content. You'll see this is a macro. This is a test deck that I just added to this account. We'll talk more about that in a sec. Here I've got a macro that opens Safari. So this is installed with SoundFlow 5 with the quick start guide. We've got a macro that launches Pro Tools. If I run that now, we'll switch to Pro Tools. And we've got one for launching Finder. And that launched here on my second screen. And you can also see when Finder got activated, it automatically on my Stream Deck switched to my Finder deck. And having a Finder deck sort of as the default deck to load is really useful. Finder is sort of already the default app on Mac OS. And so we usually use that for a good way to launch other applications. and switch to them. And so because we've set it up so that these decks automatically switched when the application gets focused, it just is a really cool way to navigate back and forth.
And that's
Um,
fully customizable. So people who think like, "Oh, well, hold on a
yeah,
second, I have to look at that deck when I go to Pro Tools." That's not the case at all. It's set
correct.
to do that.
Yeah. So the way it works in SoundFlow, you have this we have this very advanced trigger system. So essentially, in this top right corner of SoundFlow, it is where you configure when an event should happen. So if, for example, the Finder deck here, we've added an application trigger. So that means when Finder becomes active, show this deck. And also we've added a Stream Deck connected trigger so that whenever you physically connect the Stream Deck, it's going to show this deck there. If you'd chosen to use an iPad or iPhone or Android device, this would have been set to show this deck on that device instead. You can see here Wildpad, that's the name of my iPad. And so I could choose that to be the location to open this deck instead. But there, you can also set up more advanced things for this. You can even set up keyboard triggers or MIDI triggers. So you can have your MIDI keyboard toggle which deck to show on your Stream Deck and vice versa. Like you can set up all these advanced things just to show you that there's a lot of room for customizability. But before SoundFlow 5, you would have had to set all this up yourself. And the big change is we just set these default triggers up so you don't have to think about it.
Right.
Yeah. And so one thing that I've changed here, if we want to dive into a little bit of customization, because as you said, Andrew, like maybe this is not most users have one specific way of using Pro Tools or, some features that they use more than others. And so the way we do that here is as part of the installation, you get what we call My Pro Tools Deck. And this is actually a copy of what is in this Pro Tools package here. You'll see Pro Tools main deck, where there's a black corner down here that you can, it's an invitation to use for something that you built yourself. But what you should really start with if you want to make any changes to it is just this My Pro Tools deck. And, you can start just, swapping things around or even deleting any of this. You could always add it back later. But what I've done here is I've created a new deck that I just call test deck. So let's say as a starting point, maybe you want to keep all of our default functionality until you know exactly what you want to customize further. Then you could just start by creating one deck here. And I should show you in a second how that works. But essentially, if I look at my Stream Deck here, and now when I click that button, I'm going to go into that sub deck, and I then have this navigate back to previous deck feature to come back to where I was. So should we take a look at how to build your own deck
Yeah,
like that?
let's just build a deck. So let's say we've
Yep.
installed SoundFlow, we've gone through the Pro Tools package, worked with it for about a week, and we've realized that we want to get we'll just rebuild your test deck. There's some marker functions that we like, and we want to
Yep.
just group some things all onto one page.
Cool. Yeah, let's do that. So to begin with, let's show you how to delete what you've done.
Yeah.
You can either use the delete button here. I usually just use the delete button on my keyboard. So I'm going to select the button here. It's going to be highlighted in blue and hit delete. Okay. So that just deleted the reference. You can see the Stream Deck updates automatically. This just deleted the reference to the deck because we've defined the deck out here under test deck. So let me delete that as well. Right, so now we have sort of the empty installation. I also created a test macro that we can delete. That was just for fun. So the first step to create a new deck is to make sure that you're in the package where you want to add this. The default package is a great place to have all your personal content. You can always organize that by using package folders so that you don't end up with a lot of mess here. But for now, let's just start by creating a new deck. So you click New and choose Deck. And let's call this Demo Deck. That's it. You now got it here. So the next step would be to add this deck to your main Pro Tools deck here, so that there's a link on this button here on to how to get there. And the easiest thing when you're in the same package here, you can just drag and drop it down there until it highlights in white, and you just let go. You'll see we have a little bit of a bug here where they show up. The new line here is a little bit different, so I'm just gonna make it manually here, so I'm seeing the same thing. And another new thing we have in SoundFlow 5 is that you can, when you have a deck link like this, you can click open on same device. So even if I had a different device configured for my demo deck, that would be ignored here. And with that, it just makes things a little bit simpler if you turn that on. So now if I click my stream deck here, I have my demo deck, but
Ta-da!
there's nothing on it, so I can't get back.
Pretty blank.
Yeah, so one thing I could do, because we've set up the triggers to automatically show the Pro Tools deck when we're in Pro Tools, I could just switch to Pro Tools and come back, but that's a little bit annoying. So let's have a look at how we can um, get this filled up with some content. And so in the old versions of SoundFlow, you would have to first select the button where you wanted something to occur, then click here, down here, add existing command, and then sort through like hundreds of confusing elements. So let's not do that for now. One of the big new things we have is this more intuitive way of adding content to your deck. So essentially, you just click pin here. And what that will do is it will keep your deck open as you navigate through content over here. And that makes it really easy to just browse through the Pro Tools package, locate something that you want. So I sort of want to add some marker, commands here. Go to previous marker, and then I just drag and drop them over. My deck keeps being open, and yeah, that's it. We just go select between markers and search markers. Really useful functionality. And but I forgot that we also want a button to come back to
Yeah.
where we were. And that is inside Pro Tools under decks. If you just select that here, there's a button called navigate to previous deck. And so I like to just keep it in the top left corner. It makes it easy to remember that it's always there.
And
And
also,
also
if you don't know where it is, you can just search for a name.
Yeah, so
Right.
one way to do that would be so this is another new feature in SoundFlow 5, which is to hit Command K and then just search here. So navigate back to previous deck, and I would go there. Let's say I want to add the preview button. So let's say toggle preview. Just click there, and it's going to automatically locate where in all of these functions that it is. So this is a really quick way. Let's just add that because I like preview. That's it. It literally is just dragging and dropping stuff onto this deck. And when you're done, you can just click pin again. It drops out of pin mode and navigates back to where your deck is. And you don't have to do anything else. We already set it up. So let me just open it here on my stream deck. Let's go to Pro Tools. Demo deck. It has all the functionality here. I can now go between the different markers, select between markers. I can search through all my markers to go to a specific point in time. So it now actually navigated out of my deck because it quickly lost focus for Pro Tools. That's something you can work around. It's a little bit difficult to set up, but we'll have some tutorials for that. So now when I go back in here, I can toggle my previous state, and I can use the back button to come back to where I was. And so that back button functions like a back button in your browser. It remembers the last deck you were at. So you could also have a link to your demo deck from anywhere else. You might create all sorts of complicated routings in between this. For example, we have, if you go to clips here, I think you can click clip colors. That's one way to get to clip colors. You can also go to colors and then click clip colors, and it will remember, the back button will remember where you came from.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's how you would collect existing things onto your deck. Should we build a little macro?
Yeah. I think this is the obvious next step, right? Because I think with this, you can customize anything that was built in to make your own layouts. And I think that's pretty much all you need to know. And
but the Pro Tools package is very much about individual commands and not about workflows necessarily.
That's right. Yeah. And so we wanted to make making simple workflows easier as well. So let's take a look at how that works. So anything you have on a deck here needs to refer to some existing content. So you can't just start creating a macro inside of this deck editor. So the first step, if you want to have some kind of automated workflow, you'll need to start by making a new macro here. So For this, I think what we want to build is a way to process an audio suite plugin and then give it a color. So there's actually a couple of steps here we need to explain. But imagine that you're in Pro Tools and you have some some clips and you're editing all this content, and you want to keep track of what you've processed. And maybe you also want a button that automatically opens a specific audio suite plugin. For example, when working in film, I very often use Isotope RX. So I've got RX8 installed here. So, I want to create a macro that can open RX8, declick, make sure to set it to individual files and clip by clip so that I retain the handle so I can edit it afterwards as well. So it should open this plugin, set the correct settings, render it, and then give the clip a new color so that I can quickly identify that it's been processed. So that's quite a good workflow, I think, that we will be able to make just by, not by looking into scripts and stuff, but keeping it fairly simple here.
Yeah.
So let's just call it declick. And just so we're ready, now, because we're in the same package, I don't need to pin this deck. I could do it, but when we're in the same package, I can just directly drag and drop this down. So now I have a way to test my macro easily from my Stream Deck. That's always a good start. And now, so this is where the new functionality in SoundFlow 5 also comes in. So previously in SoundFlow, when you wanted to construct a macro, you'd have to click Add Action here. A little bit like you would have to search through what you wanted to add to a deck. And now you get this list of 344 different things that you can add. And what we found is it's quite difficult for users to figure out what is the correct thing to add. So you can still do this, of course, in SoundFlow 5, and you would need to do some of this for more advanced stuff. But we now also have a pin button on macros. So now I can go down here, and what we want to start with is processing something in Audio Suite. And so now if I had a preset here, we've got something called Open, Render, and Close Audio Suite plugin. So for example, I could use one of the built-in factory presets to process Altiverb, for example. So if I found something that was already ready here, I could just drag and drop that into my macro. And now that would be the first step. And we're going to fix this in a moment because we actually wanted it for Isotope.
Yeah.
So I'll show you how to fix that in a second. But just to show you how to build a macro easily with existing content. So the other thing we wanted was to color the clip in some way. So let me just give it a pink color here. I'm just going to drag that onto there. And that's how you see, like now we've built a macro. And because we're using here a quite advanced template that already does a bunch of steps, we were able to build this very easily. So we don't have to worry about how do you open and render and close an audio suite plugin. That's actually quite a series of steps. But we're reusing content that is quite advanced that was built by somebody else, in this case SoundFlow, and we could just sequence it here by dragging and dropping. But as we talked about, we want to do it for Isotope instead. So if you take a look at this preset, so what we have here is called a template. It's a way to group functionality where you can sort of give it parameters. You can customize what kind of audio suite plugin do you want to open, render, and close. You'll see a lot of these templates in various areas of the Pro Tools package. So we want to change this. We want it to be declick from Isotope, and we want to set it to clip by clip and create individual files. So when I have it here, I'm just going to click Edit a Copy, and that gives me a copy down in my presets. So we've got the factory presets folder here, which contains the stuff made by SoundFlow, and under my presets, that's your own content. So I'm going to start by double-clicking this. I can also right-click it to click Rename Command. That's another new feature in SoundFlow 5 to have context menus. I just like to double-click. So I'm going to call this declick. And next, we need to fill these variables out. Let me start by changing the input mode to clip by clip, the output mode to create individual files. And now for this next part, we'll need to take a look inside Pro Tools to see how exactly this is spelled, because it needs to be very accurate. So we've got noise reduction in 2 words, capitalized, and then we've got RX8 declick. So Let me see if I can remember that. So for category, we put in noise reduction, and we have RX8D click.
Yep.
So I think that was right. Cool. So now we already have this new preset.
And
Another
just to point out that this is even more advanced because you could select a preset within that Audio Suite plugin, or just leave it blank and it will be whatever the default preset is.
That's right. Yeah. So exactly. So if you had inside here, let me just open it up again to make it clearer. D-click. So you could use the built-in preset functionality in Pro Tools here to set, let's say, maybe sometimes you want the sensitivity to be higher, but whatever it is you want to customize, you could save your settings here into this folder, blah, 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 and then you could load this up again. But let's skip that for now just to make it a little bit simpler. So I'm just going to close it again. And let's hope it works. So one other thing we could add, of course, we have to go back to our macro and fix it so it doesn't try to use Altiverb. Another cool thing in SoundFlow 5 is that, you can kind of quickly get lost in all this navigation between all these folders. And, if you found this and you want to add it to your deck, just as not as a macro, but just as a single thing to do. In fact, let's just call it click macro, just so we can distinguish it from the macro we actually did. Well, so this is preset. Sorry about that. Using myself here. So I could now just click add to deck, select the deck that I want to add it to, for example, the demo deck, click OK. And now it got added right here at the first available slot. So this is just a really easy way to locate stuff, instead of having to, if you have this selected, you'd have to remember where it was, then go to the package, find the deck, pin it, and then go back. So you can quickly see how having that add to deck button saves a couple of steps. You can also always use the back button here to navigate to where you were just before. That's another way to remember those things. So let's go back to our demo deck here. So this preset we added, that was not the macro. We wanted to build our macro that both does the processing and also does the clip coloring. So here's that macro, D-click, and we had this first entry that pointed to Altiverb. So let me just pin this macro now, then use this go to command button here. So now we can see the Altiverb there. And now I'm just going to drag and drop our new preset for D-click down here in between those two. So now you can see we would be actually processing two different Audio Suite plugins and then coloring it. So as you can see, you can add as many steps to your macro as you want. But for now, let's just keep it to D-click and set the clip color. At this point, let me just go out of pin mode here. At this point, you could also add a keyboard shortcut to this. So of course, we added this D-click macro to our demo deck here. But you could add any other type of trigger to get this process done. For example, you could add a keyboard trigger, let's say Control-Shift-D, and have that only work when Pro Tools is focused. So now we've added two ways to do D-click processing and setting the clip color, just to show you that this is a really flexible system. Let's go back into Pro Tools and see if this works now. So we still have this clip color window open. So I'm just going to go into my demo deck, click this button, D-click, and it now opens up the D-click, processes it, and sets the color.
It's that easy.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and if this is
better
the
myself.
kind of thing you've got to do 7,000 times in an hour and a half's worth of dialogue.
Yeah, and I mean, you can process several clips at once, of course, as well. And that's just a built-in Audio Suite feature, of course. But this now, it makes it really easy for me to see how that all works. And as we're building out the Pro Tools package, we're going to get even more advanced functionality that you'll be able to drag and drop like this. But I think this workflow shows you that you can both sort of use pre-existing functionality, like the preset for setting a specific light that a specific color, but you can also very easily customize these presets just by filling in a couple of blanks here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when people see programs like this that are saying, and it's probably a lot like your first version. It's like, oh, it'll do that, but hold on, how do I customize it to be more like what I want to do? And most of the functions you would want to customize are like this with presets. So all of the functionality is built, and you just plug in, well, which plugin do you want to do that with? And it can be anything. You don't have to wait for SoundFlow to build you the version that runs the plugin you want to use. You just put the name in, done.
Yeah, and I think a lot of just to be upfront and frank about this, we had a lot of users who got scared away because one thing to mention that I think is really important is that any of all this can be advanced or confusing. I mean, so even what I showed now still involves some steps in setting it up, but we have a really responsive community in here.
Yeah.
The forum that you can access it from this tab, or you can access it by going into your browser on forum.soundflow.org, which is perhaps an even better way of accessing it, but we wanted to make it available inside of the app as well. And so we have, I think at this point, over 6,000 threads in here and over 40,000 posts of people just helping each other with whatever you want. And so one thing that scares people away a little bit is if you go into this, here's somebody wanting help with something in Logic, you'll see a lot of this, scripts. And I actually made Andrew promise to not talk about scripts. So
Yeah, it's not my fault. Christian
sorry
did
for
it.
mentioning it
It wasn't
myself.
me.
My point being, throughout all of what I showed you here, all of this customization, there was nothing related to scripts. And
Yeah.
that's our mission. So even if today some of the things that you need to do would still require scripts, some of the more advanced functionality, you could still just ask in the forum and copy paste something in. But more and more with every release of SoundFlow from month to month, we'd be adding more functionality that doesn't require that level. And we're really thrilled that you can already now make these drag and drop macros that actually provide really customizable functionality without you ever looking at code. So that's something we really wanted with this release to make our users understand that we're trying to make it easier. And this really moves the game quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you used to need to be a bit of a geek. It was tough to really get stuff working, and now it's
Mhm.
not at all, because not only can you be dragging these commands, which are from the pre-built Pro Tools package, but you can drag commands that you've gotten from the store for somebody. Like if you want to use someone else's process and then color code something, you can drag and drop like the Melodyne prep script into a macro and then color whatever the regions that are selected. So you
Mhm.
can build with anything. Everything is a building block, basically.
And maybe that provides a good segue into the next section of this. Am I right in that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna. So when we were laying this out, what we talked about. I'm just moving things to different screens and stuff,
Yeah.
so you don't get video feedback. Disco party. Was the idea of how simple it is for a new user, how a new user doesn't need to know even really what SoundFlow is doing under the hood. It's just drag and drop functionality, build some decks. But if you want something that isn't there, what do you do? And the two places that we talked about were the store and the forum. So the forum
Yeah.
is a great resource. And one thing that's really cool, I mean, you showed that script in the forum very briefly, and like we don't want to show pages full of code.
Yeah.
But if you go into the forum and say, look, I'm trying to, like, one of the things that brought me to SoundFlow was I wanted a way to toggle input on the last track in a session, because that's always my mix track, and I want to go between my live mix and my last version of the printed mix,
Mhm.
whether it's on screen or not. And I asked in the forum, and I got help, and within about 30 seconds I had code that I could just copy and paste into an empty script. I had no idea what I was doing, but I put a trigger on it for F19, and F19 has been my input toggle since day one of SoundFlow. So even if you don't want to get into the scripting, if you absolutely can't find something to do something, someone's going to write it for you.
Yeah.
And the people who are geeky, like I spent the first 6 or 7 months in the how-to forum with people asking how to do stuff. And for me, it was a way for me to learn how to program by answering their questions.
Yeah.
And there's so many people who do that, and they're really great about it. Not to mention Christians in the forum constantly. So
I
Yeah,
try to not sleep if I can.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, sleeping's bad.
Yeah, I think maybe I mean, but while you get set up with your part of the demo, the way that I look at it, just to describe it to the audience, is that we have different types of users that we want to support. And part of the journey of making technology, as we do, is I mean, in my case, it started with solving a problem for myself, and then figuring out other people want that. Then you figure out some people are different than you, and then it's like the slow journey of realizing, why are they different, how are they different, can our product solve that, can we solve it now, or can we solve it in the future, and how can we build a strategy as a company to make sure that we eventually will support as many types of users as possible. And to shed some light, and I've talked to you, Andrew, about this before, and a lot of other collaborators that we have, but I think it actually helps to have a little bit sense of um, how we think about this internally. So the way I think it is that we started with, on a scale of the most technical user, like yourself, who is happy to spend 6 months learning advanced JavaScript.
Yeah,
We've got those, let's say, at the bottom here, low levels coding. Then at the very other end, we've got the user who wants to install something that just works. And all, like, I'm not measuring any of them. I'm just describing different types of users. And it's been a journey for me to understand all this. And this is really the type of user up here that we've started supporting in SoundFlow 5. Now we've
yeah,
got users who are, happy to create their own decks, but it should still be just built-in functionality. Then we've got people who maybe want to sequence some things. Then we've got people who want to, build more advanced macros, but it shouldn't be scripts. So you want to customize stuff; it should work um, exactly to your specific workflow. But it's the type of user who would get scared at looking at JavaScript code, which is perfectly understandable, by the way. And so that we also do have quite good support for. And then we start getting into people wanting to build really complex logic with just a visual interface. And that's currently, and this is just me being frank and open, I think that's currently the remaining gap that we have for SoundFlow.
right.
And we have some plans. So that's the good thing, right? Because this is all a strategy that we're filling out all the gaps so that we can eventually address any type of user. And we have a plan for that. That I can't wait when that comes out. There's always a plan for the future. So we
Great.
do have a gap with those who want to build advanced logic just using visual components, but it will get fixed. And then the next step after that is people who can copy paste some logic in scripts, but maybe don't understand fully how scripts work, but they can still get something from the forum and change a couple of lines, and then and then we're all the way down to the bottom. So the good thing here is that we now only have that one gap left, and we have a plan on how to fix it. And so I think this just goes to show how crazy it can be to develop software.
Yeah,
That you need to think
it's
about all those
amazing,
different.
and it is a full-on platform, and I mean, the fact that you're missing sort of this one tier of people, and it's what's great about it, though, is that the geeks actually, you wanna show my screen now? And I'll,
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
switch over. So what I put together was just a little deck of some stuff, and you'll see most of them have my face on it because I know them, so it's easy for me to show them off. But what you can get is that the geeks like me who get really into it and want to build these very functional things can actually build apps for other people that become incredibly simple. So it isn't that, oh, now I've made a 50,000 step macro and you need to copy and paste it, or I'll give you a screenshot or whatever. I can actually build apps. So I want to go from sort of some faceless stuff up to some full blown apps and kind of show you guys what else there is. So the first thing is, and I built this just for tonight, but I actually really like it. The decks, when you're showing them on the screen, can be any size. And I love this like 6x1 because it's like a little tiny launcher deck. So you're not constrained to the proportions that you would get on a physical Stream Deck. And again, this can be on any device, and I'm going to talk about that specifically in a bit. But the first thing I wanted to show you is this amazing package, track data utilities that Chris Shaw wrote. And what to me is so great about this, and I think this speaks to what you were talking about sort of early on in the evolution of SoundFlow is this is stuff built by people who spend their entire lives trying to get rid of the things that frustrate them and the things that go wrong as they're using Pro Tools, either because it's repetitive or because they just do something that, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, and ways out of it. So I want to walk you through this set of track data utilities first. So this is a set of scripts that Chris Shaw wrote, and it comes with this little deck. So I've just used his deck, but as we talked about before, you could drag these onto your own deck if you only want to use a couple of them. You can customize how you get to them. You could decide you don't want to use his deck and you want to trigger it by hitting the top note on your MIDI keyboard, or you want to assign a keystroke. It doesn't matter how you do it, but each one of these is going to run a script that does stuff. So the first thing is, let's say you've got a session like this, which has got so doubled vocals, and you've got your verse vocal and your chorus vocal are split up. So you spend some time and you actually get the verse vocal sounding good, and you're tweaking the plugins. So he's got this great script, just cycle plugins, and it just opens up the plugin windows one at a time on the track, and it skips unused slots. Now I'm cycling through my 3 plugins, and like, okay, finally, this vocal sounds fantastic. And I've got 6 other tracks of vocals. So I could option drag these plugins down, or I could make myself a track preset, or you can select this track, hit copy track data, and then his script goes ahead and does some stuff. And like, well, I don't know. All right, I'm copied. And I just got a little notice up here that says track data copied. Chris is really good with his notifications. You always know exactly what's going on. Now I can say, you know what? All of these tracks need to start up like that. And you can either paste everything, just paste the inserts, or just paste the sends. So let's just paste the inserts onto those tracks. Selects the tracks, pastes them in. Takes a second because it's a lot of tracks. I probably should have just done a couple of tracks. There it goes. Come on.
I'm happy the stream didn't break down from all the processing.
Yeah. And so there you go. So I've just copied all those plugins to those tracks like it's nothing. And then let's say, oh man, I got it. I don't actually want them on here. I can very quickly just clear the inserts. So if you get a session from somebody that you need to work on and you don't want their processing, you can very quickly clear all the inserts across a bunch of tracks. So this is sort of small stuff in a way, but it is a lot of steps. And if you wanted to build this yourself, there are a lot of things where you think, oh, hold on a second, I'm using track presets, and what are they going to be called, and how am I going to remember what they're called? So Chris's scripts are brilliant at doing that. There's also one more I want to show you. He's got utilities here for taking a dual mono track and making it stereo, or taking a stereo track, and it's in quotes because it's not really stereo, and just keeping either the left or the right. You can decide. So if you're getting stems printed out of some other program, this happens a lot as you're prepping sessions. Mm-hmm. This might be my favorite script that anyone has ever written, though. So this is for when you're scrolling around and you want to solo safe something, and by accident you've got the option key, or sorry, you want to mute something, and you've got the option key held down by mistake, and now you've just muted everything in your session. Some stuff used to be muted, some didn't. And this is when you say, all right, I am willing to throw out the last 30 minutes of work rather than figure out what the mute state was. Restore mutes from backup. You just click it and it goes into the last session file backup, and it gets your mutes, and you're done. And
I've
then
never seen this before.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then you realize that sometimes, like, you wait too long, it's done a session file backup right after you hit the option mute. So if you hold down shift, it does it from the penultimate backup. Like, it's just brilliant. And I think probably every single person watching this stream has hit option and clicked on a mute button at some point in their career. And it's a nightmare. So anyway, so that's a fantastic package. And there are lots of packages like this, and both music facing or post facing. And then there's a lot of stuff that just is in the middle, which is great.
And can you quickly show how would one get that package in the store, and how would you?
Yeah, absolutely.
What you have
so
here?
if we go to the store, we can just search by, well, I think, can we search by
Actually,
guy who
this is
did
one
it?
of the staff picks, but yeah, and that's also why it's sorted at the top there.
There you go. So track the utilities, and I just started typing in his name, or I could have typed anything. So the search everywhere in SoundFlow is the most intelligent search. It actually shows you what you're searching for, no matter what you type in. It just always works. So I already have it. Oh, apparently I'm not even running the latest update. Oh, because there's a new beta of it. But if you don't have it, it'll say install. If you do, it can say update, or then you can go to package. Like, let's say you want to add it to a deck. This could be the quickest way to get to it, and then you can drag and drop onto a
Mhm.
deck. But like Kristen showed you before, the store is a very fast way to get to things. And people are starting to get really good at tagging packages for which programs they're good for, what the workflow is, writing brief or not so brief things about what they do. So that would be the easiest way to do it. You just click on install and you're done.
Mhm.
And then his package comes with this deck. So I
Got it.
just added that deck to my little deck, and he's got a much cooler icon than any of mine, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
and just to jump in there, if you didn't want all of the functionality exactly laid out as Chris has designed it, you could also build your own deck and just add the commands that you use from track data utilities, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, exactly like you were dragging the marker commands out of the Pro Tools package, you can drag individual commands out of this package, and they're all here separately for
Yeah.
you to drag. And when you've got something like the Process Audio Suite where you're specifying the plugin, each one of those presets is something you can drag onto a deck. And again, that's like the Tizio plugin loader, which I didn't put on here for some reason, but another fantastic app, which is basically just a gigantic basket of presets for loading pretty much every plugin in the world. And if you've got something crazy, you make your own preset. You can also, you see that all the icons and things like that, you can put an icon onto anything really, really simply. You could just screen capture something
Mhm.
and then go into SoundFlow and, well, am I going to do this? I
I
can't
don't
do
think you
it.
can
No,
override.
I can't on an
Yeah.
install thing. But like I'll do it wherever I got something. So let's say I want this guy to be that icon.
Yeah.
You can make custom icons in no time at all and paste them on, and then it's very easy to find stuff once you get to a once you place it on a deck, or even just searching through the large list of things.
Mhm.
I want to talk about the triggers a little bit because we talked like you can trigger things from a deck, you can trigger it from the keyboard, but the triggers, even without doing something really advanced by triggering like from OSC, or you can trigger on system events like when a disk comes in. So you could do backup scripts when a disk is mounted, things happen on the disk, stuff like that. But you can also do something where people who use command focus mode, I don't know anybody who likes the N key, which toggles the insert follows playback thing. I don't know anybody who works that way ever. And it's right next to B, which is separate region, which people use all the time.
Mhm.
You can actually, let's just do this. I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to make a new script and I'm going to leave it completely blank. So this does nothing. And I'm just going to call it disable N.
Mhm.
And just using the trigger system in SoundFlow, I can keep that ever from triggering. So I'm going to add a keyboard trigger and I'm going to say it's only in Pro Tools. And the key is going to be just N. And because it's a simple bit of text, you immediately get this extra condition which says ignore when typing text. So what this means is if I type N and there's no text field open in Pro Tools, this will swallow it. And I could make it beep, I could make it say hello, or I can make it do something totally different and actually make the N key useful. But here I'm going to add zero functionality. And now I'm hitting the N key, and that is not toggling.
Mhm.
But if I go to edit a track name, I can absolutely type the N.
Yeah.
So it's really, really smart. And
A little bit of limitation there, just to be frank.
yeah,
Unfortunately, we can't currently know if the comment field of
yes,
of a track is focused. So in that case, you would need to temporarily bypass the SoundFlow shortcuts to get that
yeah,
done. But the default shortcut for toggling SoundFlow on or off for shortcuts is Control Escape. and you can add your own shortcut to that as well. So there are workarounds for that. In the film world, it's the Y key that people do this with, because the Y key will take the original timestamp of an audio file and move it, move it to that timestamp in the
Oh,
session.
right.
So don't do that. Don't
Yeah.
hit it now. But yeah, that's definitely useful.
Yeah. So the trigger system itself is so powerful, you can use it to automate things without actually writing any code.
Mhm.
It's great. And obviously you can just use it to remap keystrokes. Okay. So um I'll just do a couple other things. So then you can have, I don't know, people watching the stream may have already seen Melodyne Prep. So let me just talk about the Melodyne Prep script. So again, this is a
Yeah.
faceless script. It just runs and it does stuff. But if you think about the workflow to get audio into Melodyne, you need to almost always you want Melodyne on the first insert slot because you don't want processed audio going into Melodyne. So the first thing is you've got to free up the first insert slot. Then you need to put Melodyne in. Then you need to click the transfer button. And then you need to either hit play with the selection and transfer in real time, or you can use one of the hacks by either committing or freezing the track to load faster than real time. But if you commit, then you need to delete the track that you just made by committing, or if you freeze, you need to unfreeze. So there was a day I had a session like this, but probably with way more vocals, and I had to put them all into SoundFlow, into a Melodyne. And I just thought I was going to kill myself if I had to do it manually. So it took me a long time to do because the moving the plugins around thing was trickier than I thought. But I wrote this script. So now let's take these tracks, which I've conveniently filled up with inserts, and just say, I want to get all those tracks into Melodyne. So it's going to save how my screen is set up, which is nice. So if they were different track heights, it would save that and floating windows and stuff. And it actually drags the plugins around. I never get tired of watching this.
That's amazing.
So
And
it's
of
good.
course, I mean, out of all the different things we can do in SoundFlow, there's always going to be some things where we need to automate the mouse, which is what you're seeing here. And what you, Andrew, have done and have learned is how to, for these really advanced scripts in SoundFlow, wrapped it in a way so that it actually ends up being stable,
Yes.
even though it's a really complicated sequence. And so part of what we want to show off with this is that, we don't expect any normal user of SoundFlow to be able to write this kind of stuff, but you can get access to this for free.
Yeah,
We've
this is
been
free
kind
in
enough
the
to
store.
share this for free. Yeah.
Yeah, which is all right, this will take a minute. Too many plugins going on because I'm stupid. So we can talk about that when we go. But yeah, and that's one of the great things if you are the geek and you are going to be developing, is it's not a simple platform in terms of the functionality available to the people who want to dive into it. It is a fully fledged programming platform. So, like
Mhm.
for instance, when I'm dragging the plugins, every once in a while, when you drag a plugin, it doesn't move. And because of the order I'm dragging things in, you could actually lose plugins if it drags it over the top of another plugin because that plugin
Mhm.
hasn't moved. But in my script, I'm able to actually say, hey, after I drag the plugin, did it move? Check the button it was
Got it.
supposed to go to.
Yeah.
Is it there? And so to be able to do that is amazing because it takes something where it's like, wow, I figured out a way to automate this process, but it's a little bit flaky and I have to keep an eye on it. And it gets it to the point where I can leave the room,
Mhm.
which is important. So we
That's
just
a
finished.
really interesting distinction to make. I think it's also what eventually ends up setting SoundFlow apart from different solutions, in that every single command you'll see run, even the simplest ones, employ that same kind of mechanism as you're doing. Essentially, we try to find the best way to do something, and if we can do that, we do that. If we can't, we'll go to the second best way of implementing something. All the way at the end, we might do stuff like mouse simulation. But even if we end up having to do that, we'll double check that the result was as expected so that the script won't all of a sudden just fire off random mouse events somewhere, and
Yeah,
get
which
something.
means if you're using event or building blocks from the Pro Tools package, you can be pretty damn sure that when you drag them all into a sequence in a macro, they are all going to happen every single time you run the macro. And that's a big deal because sometimes this stuff, especially because you do have to do some things with the mouse. That stuff can be very, very flaky. So that is a workflow that I just showed that
Oh
is
yeah, we
more than
just
possible to do manually, but
and
it's a
this worked on the live stream. It's
yeah,
always
which is
nice, right?
crazy because
How many
normally
times
live
have you seen
streaming, yeah,
somebody
live
showing off a
streaming
workflow?
eats
Sorry.
stuff.
Yeah.
But then you can also get to the point where you give Pro Tools functionality that it doesn't actually have. And I just want to show really quickly two of the apps that have been out for a while.
Yeah.
But just to give you the idea of how far you can go with this. So the first would be the color deck. So this is basically just a really big version of this. And like the stuff in the official Pro Tools package, where you can specifically say, hey, I want to color clips or I want to color tracks, what that's doing is it's getting around the contextual menu in the color palette, which switches to tracks if you're in the header and switches to clips if you're in the part of the edit window that has playlists. And that's cool because it's content aware, but with edit selection or track selection follows edit selection, I never select tracks over here because it's a pain. I got to use command and shift and whatever, and I can
Mm.
just drag a selection here, but now I want to color them. So one thing that this color palette does is it lets you lock it into tracks mode or clips mode,
Mm.
which is just something that speeds up life. It's also, for some reason, it looks prettier here. It's the exact same colors. I like it. But then you can name colors as well, which is kind of cool. Because that way, like I can use colors that are very close to each other, which normally you can't really differentiate. They look the same. But because this will show you what is selected the same way that the color palette will, you can actually use colors that are right next to each other and tell what's going on. And then it's got a function that doesn't exist at all in Pro Tools is I can actually select tracks based on their color. And right here you can say select is with shift, so I can hold down shift and click on the color, and now all my lead vocals are selected. So if I want to change the output or add a plugin or something like that, I'm immediately into the shift option land of being able to do it. It's the color
That's so
palette,
cool.
right?
And
It's not.
it looks amazing on an iPad as well, I have to say.
Yeah, and you can save the name set. So if I have someone else prepping a session for me, I actually send them a tiny little file. They open it up, and all my names are there. And you can have multiple name sets. Like I've added a bunch of stuff for an orchestral record that has up to 5 layers of strings on it. So I've added stuff here. But then when I go back to a rock record, I don't need those, and those are for. So anyway, this is an app that runs not like it's running macros inside of another program. This is an app that runs like an app, which is pretty cool, and it extends Pro Tools functionality. Another one, really quickly, is the offset counter. So for everybody who works on music, you work on a session and you print a mix, and the mix doesn't start right at the beginning of the session. And then you get an email of mix notes, and the mix notes say, hey, at a minute 30, can you do something about that tambourine? And like, okay, well, let's see. The thing starts at 3, so that's 133. So I'll go from here, or either I'll go to 133 or I'll select at the beginning, and now I'll roll my selection and look at my length thing and get into 130. No, that's
Yeah.
boring.
Right.
So I wanted to toggle input on my bottom track. That was the first project. And then like an idiot, this was my second project, which meant I had to learn just a ridiculous amount of stuff to do it. But you can hit 0 counter, and now this spot in the session is 0. And if I want to go to a minute 30, I can hit locate and type 130, and now I'm at 130. But you'll notice I'm actually at 133.
Yeah.
And it isn't just a static timer, it runs in real time. So you can see, this is where the live stream's slowing it down. Normally it's really responsive, but
Of course.
you're still, well, here, let's hide the ugly part, shall we?
Yeah.
We'll just do that.
Perfect.
And the other thing that's really cool about this is you can run this on an iPad or on a tablet or on a second screen. You can have multiple ones open. So if you're working on, let's say, an orchestral tracking session, you can actually have a copy of this running on the conductor's iPad out at their podium that's running in bars and beats, while yours is running on minutes and seconds or time code, because it'll work with the sub counter. So you can have two different times going. So you can just use it as a smarter big counter, but then you can also extend Pro Tools functionality by re-zeroing the counter, which is
Yeah.
something you cannot do in Pro Tools.
And to just in case anybody doesn't know about where to get these packages, so the two last packages you showed are some of our premium packages you can find by going under premium. So you'd
And
search
then
for
not
premium.
searching.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So
you'll be
there's
able to purchase these from our store. And so SoundFlow has worked with external developers Andrew is now an external developer. You're also a lot of other things, but now you're also a SoundFlow developer. And so to make that worthwhile, the hundreds of hours that the developers spend building these products, some of those are sold. But there's also, as you know, a lot of free content available in the store, of course.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I spend almost as much time supporting the Melodyne prep script as I do
Yeah,
the paid stuff. So it isn't
yeah,
like, oh, you just throw it out there and you're done. I think
yeah,
people do take pride of ownership in what they've got in the store or even in the forum. You'll get
yeah,
discussions where a script gets tweaked and tweaked and tweaked endlessly.
yeah,
So just really quickly, before we get
yeah.
back to you and some questions, I'll just show you a couple decks that are not out yet, but are getting really close. One of them, I think we could probably launch tomorrow if we felt like it,
Oh,
is
yeah.
the transport deck. So this is very much like just dragging and dropping some functionality from the official Pro Tools package. Like there's hit play, there's change record mode type of thing, but it's a little bit more dynamic in that it will actually light up the
Mm,
way the Pro Tools transport will light up. And you can stop and start either place. You can record ready and it will flash in time with Pro Tools. Um,
mhm,
then you've got in the Pro Tools transport, you've got return to zero and go to end, which are two of the least useful things ever. So I've got the previous marker and next marker functionality in here
nice.
because those are really useful to have on the top level of your transport. Then I've got 4 spots here to store locator points. So if I want to go to the top of the song, I know I want to go to the verse. Okay, I'm just combining very simple functionality from a bunch of different places.
Mhm.
Then I thought, well, okay, but while you're recording, what else do you need to do? Well, you might want to duplicate a playlist. Like if you're doing overdubs real quick and you want to duplicate a playlist, you want to, okay, give me another
Nice.
playlist. Okay, I want to turn pre and post roll on and off. I want to turn the metronome on and off. These are the things that you do while you're recording. Now you might say, well, okay, that's great, but what's the point? Because you're sitting in front of your computer and you're right next to all of that functionality. But I'm just going to show you right here that it's this is live cast going on, but it runs on
Oh,
my
sorry.
iPhone. And the reason I built this was because behind me is this modular, and I was doing a bunch of overdubs on a record using the modular, and it was driving me crazy spinning around and trying to punch in and then do something on the modular. So I actually have my iPhone just in the middle of the modular, hitting record, going to
Nice.
markers, duplicating playlists. And then if you want to change play mode or record mode, you can hold down the command key while you're at the computer. And there's a lot more sort of functionality underneath, including if you want to go to zero or to end, like if
Cool.
you really want to. So,
Yeah, I
the,
mean, sorry, just to interrupt. I
yeah,
saw a story on. We have a really lively Instagram community. Some of whom I hope are watching now as well. I saw a story yesterday, I think, or the day before, of a person using SoundFlow on an iPhone to remote control their Pro Tool station in a different room. So they were in the vocal booth, just doing all their
yeah,
recordings there. They didn't need to have an engineer. They could be their own engineer and go to a separate room to record. And because everything's connected via Wi-Fi, it's so easy to now do
yeah.
that.
I've
Yeah.
actually used this where I've got through the magic of Dante and some other stuff, I've got the output of my Pro Tools rig can actually hit my Sonos system. And I was at the other end of my house in a different room because I wanted to check a mix on my stereo and just running the transport. It's
Right. That's
I
really
mean,
cool.
yes, there are other ways you might be able to do some of this, but to be able to just have this deck right in front of you with all the stuff you actually use
Mhm.
while overdubbing. And this is what I was saying before, which I think is really important. sometimes when the software developers are developing features, and this is not just Avid, and I'm not picking on anybody, but these are people who develop features for a living. And they obviously take a lot of input from users, but the ability for users to develop features using SoundFlow makes this stuff so unbelievably useful
Mhm.
because it's all born out of the frustration of a user in the moment saying, I got to automate this. This is driving me crazy. Then it turns out there are 500 other people who are also driven crazy by it and they want it automated as well. So, really quickly, I was just going to tease the big app. Should I do this?
Uh-oh.
Let's
Yeah.
tease the big app.
Are
All
you
right.
ready?
One of the forum is full of people automating bouncing mixes. And everybody has a different workflow for it, and everybody does different things and bouncing stems. And so very early on, probably my third script after the the making things go to input and the offset counter was bouncing mixes. So I built an app that helps you bounce mixes. I'm not going to walk you all the way through it, but basically what it does is it gives you, oh, I don't have a selection in the timeline, so it's going to tell me that, which is a nice little warning because otherwise you know you're going to bounce your entire project. So it gives you your bounce window plus a lot of other functionality. So if, let's say, this mix was approved and I needed to print some mixes, normally I would bounce a mix that was my main mix. Then I would solo the vocals, print an acapella mix. I would mute the lead vocal, print a TV mix, mute all the vocals, print an instrumental mix. And then I'd probably have to start printing stems. So you do that for every song on a record. Let's say it's 12 songs, and let's say with all the stems, you're really lucky and you're only printing 10 mix passes per. That's 120 mix passes to print a 12-song record, which is not that terrible. And you can sit there and do it, or if you're lucky, you've got someone who can do it for you. But the thing about it, that even if you've got a system and you've got someone else who can do it, the thing about it that's a problem for me is in between setting up every mix pass, you're waiting for it to print. And that's when your mind wanders and you do a crossword puzzle and you forget what you just printed and you screw stuff up
Mhm.
constantly. So I wanted a way to kind of stack these things up and then bounce. So just really, really quickly, let's say I need to print my main 4 mix passes for this song. So I would just come in here and I would say, okay, this is going to be my main mix and it's going to be a wave and stereo and it's going to be my print bus. So that's all correct. And it took all these settings out of the bounce window, by the way. So it sets it up exactly how you had it set up last. Then I'm going to print 48K and 24-bit. And look at that. It shows it in green to show me that I am bouncing the sample rate of my session. And if I change this to 44.1, it'll say, you can absolutely do that. But by the way, you're not bouncing at the sample rate of your session. And you lose some other functionality down here, just like you would in the normal bounce window. But I can very quickly set it to the session sample rate. Then import after bounce becomes active and available again. And then not only can you do the stuff you can normally do, so I could print it somewhere on the disk and bring it into my clip list, I can also say, once it's in, let's export a copy 4416 for somebody and put it in a different directory. And I can say, when you bring it in, I want you to put it on my mix track, which is down here. So now it will make a playlist and pop that mix pass onto this mix track when it's done. So it's bouncing the mix and then a couple of extra things after the fact, which is really cool. But now let's talk about doing those extra mix passes. I can just say, well, hold on a second. I need to do a version with these 2 tracks soloed. So I will add a solo pass here, and that's going to be my acapella mix. And then I also need to do a version with those muted. So I'm going to add my instrumental mix. And then I need to do one with just this guy muted. And that's going to be my TV mix. All right. So it's added these 4 passes. And then let's say I also need to print every single one of these vocals as its own pass for stems. So I'm going to add stems here, and it's going to go through and just double check playlists for all these tracks before we get into the dialogue. And then these are not going to be called main mix. They're going to be called stem. I'm not going to go through this because it gets a little bit complicated with the naming, but you can name these all, and you can also come in and clean up the names and say, get rid of all of the .02s, or if there were CMs at the bottom automatically,
Mhm.
or you can just say, well, I don't want to call this lead vocal falsetto plus. I want to call it something else, whatever. When you say done, it will add that to the list. So now you can see at the bottom of this, I've got 8 mix passes that are my stems for all my vocals. And then we'll see if proceed works with the video conference going. Sometimes this will mess up. But what it will do now is get lots of information about the session and how it's going to print all of those mixes. And hopefully it's just going to work. We'll see in a second. And then it will add it to a list of pending stuff. And that's going to come up now. So there you go. So here are all the mix passes that I just, well, this is it. This is everything that I just said I want to print. And then this was one that was in the app before. So you can go through song by song, set all of these up, and then you say bounce all. And
you can even do this from different sessions as well. Correct?
Different sessions, absolutely. And the sessions don't even have to be the same sample rate. You could set up bouncing 5 projects all at once.
Wow.
Hit bounce all and
go on
sleep.
vacation.
Yeah, and go to sleep. I printed stems for an Atmos, a record I was going to mix in Atmos, and I was bouncing probably about 35 to 40 stems per song. So I set them all up. It took me about an hour and a half, and it was 230 something stems.
Wow.
And every time I wasn't working, I would hit bounce all. And then when I needed to work again, I'd just cancel whichever one it was in the middle of, delete. It already knows which ones it's bounced and which it hasn't. And then I would just pick up again and let it bounce all night. And it sends you a text after each one to say, hey, I did this one. It's smart about if it has to rename a mix, if it brings them into the session and puts them on tracks, it makes sure that they don't get added to the next mix pass. So anyway, this is Bounce Factory, and we're pretty far along in the beta testing. And I think that will be, I don't know when it's going to be out, but pretty soon.
Yeah,
pretty soon.
The more comments we get on that you guys are running, the quicker it's going to come out.
I don't know, man. It has changed my life. It's gotten to the point where things that used to be a pain, like, wow, I really don't want to make stems. I now know why you need 35 or 40 stems, because in Atmos, you really want that kind of control. And now I've got no problem at all printing them. So it's brilliant.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Andrew. And yeah, I've seen the same thing with people coming up with their own workflows in the scripts. And of course, I think that's this really shows off that great, just platform ability that we have with SoundFlow. We can have people who tinker with creating fairly simple bounce scripts themselves, and some are more advanced than others. We've got the whole forum collaboration going. And then on top of that, you can get some incredibly advanced functionality that can save it can save users so much time or money on, and just get more time to do what you really love to do, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's what this is about. It's not just being quicker. It's as you said, it's making sure you don't make mistakes, send out the wrong mixes to clients. It's embarrassing.
And also, while you're working to just stay creative, I mean, you've talked about this before in other platforms. We didn't really talk about it a lot, other than while you're clicking all the things you have to click to make something happen, you kind of forget what it was you were going to do. But it's just all about being creative, and not, because if you know you've got to print stems of something, that can sit on your shoulder and just be this existential dread. I'm just going to move my screen so I'm actually looking at my camera now. Yeah. And it's amazing how much more creative I feel, and I feel as though I work much faster, and that my work is so much more fun and productive. For every single one of these macros I've either written or gotten from the store, gotten help from, or all of that stuff. It's fantastic. Yeah. I think we've talked a lot. Should we get some questions so we talk about stuff that people actually want to know?
Let's do that. Let's bring Mark in.
Let's bring Mark in.
Hello.
In the meantime, you can check out your channels and see if there are any comments and questions you want to resurrect as well.
Yeah, and
Hi,
thanks so
Mark.
much
Yeah,
for being part of this and for being streaming this on your platforms as well. Really appreciate it.
absolutely. This is amazing. Yeah, Andrew, you just dropped a bomb on the internet with Bounce Factory there. So our
Well,
chat
I
rooms
want
are
to
going
point out that
crazy
Mark
at the moment.
has been beta testing it with me for a while and has been super helpful. And it's
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, and I
yeah.
Good.
forgot to
Finding
say,
bugs, Mark.
can I just mention the one other thing that someone may be asking about is yes, it will also switch playlists. So if you work on some stuff with people with potty mouths, you can do the clean versions by switching playlists. So yes, it does do that now.
Which I just had a record for, doing a bunch of cleans on a record, and then another use case story with that thing. I had another record where the person wanted to do live tracks. It was a looping artist, so they wanted every track on every song on a 10-song record as a separate stem.
Wow.
And that was, luckily for me, was right at the time where you were looking for a beta tester, and I set that thing up it took me, I think, 2 hours to set up the entire record, and then I went to sleep. I ran it over the course of 2 days, 2 different nights, and it literally saved me 2 full work days. And I like, not to sound like an infomercial, but that's a testament to SoundFlow as well as Bounce Factory,
Absolutely.
though. If you think about I made 2 days worth more money that month because I didn't have to sit there and bounce mixes. And like, yes, I still charge for bouncing stems or whatever, but it's not going to be the full rate of, if I can do 2 more mixes that month. So that's it just entire mind blowing and game changing event for me. So yeah.
Yeah. I just
Excellent.
noticed we had somebody asked, where is this Bounce Factory? That was the exact kind of comment I was hoping we would get.
Yeah.
But as Andrew mentioned before, this is still in beta. But hopefully it's been tested for a really long time now. And I guess
Yeah.
we
I mean,
just have
I've
to
been
jump in
using it.
soon, right?
I've been using it for about a year, and it wasn't until everyone else started using it that I realized not everybody works like me. So that's been the last kind of 3 or 4 months, is getting it to work with everybody's workflow. But I'm hoping within a month or so we should be able to get it out there.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Let's dive into, Mark. Have you been seeing some questions from users?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So we're taking most of our questions from Crowdcast. If you guys are watching, you can go to puremix.net and click on the link. You'll be taken to our Crowdcast room. You can submit your question and you can upvote each other's questions. And how we like to start this off is by answering the most asked question or most upvoted question on Crowdcast. So number 1, Christian, what is your favorite compressor to use on a kick drum? Just kidding.
That
Love
question
it.
is just stuck at the top of the queue from everyone.
Forever. Yeah.
That's
Just
hilarious. I
Okay,
wouldn't even know where to start. Yeah.
Okay, so our first most upvoted question. Is this a Mac OS only application?
Yeah. Unfortunately, at this time, it is. We know getting Windows support is really important. We are not sort of punishing Windows users, but it did start as a macOS app. We made some important choices along the road, so that all of the core components that make up SoundFlow, there's sort of like several different modules in the core. They all are sort of ready to be made cross-platform, which means we don't have to invent that from the start. It's not like like this big crazy journey that we have to get on for all of those. But then over the years, like, you develop a lot of specific content on top of that. For example, the deep integration with Pro Tools that we have is very Mac OS specific. So while the SoundFlow core could be made, translated into Windows fairly easily, relatively speaking, there's a lot of the functionality that people have come to understand, or the good experience that we have in macOS today is something that would take a much longer time to really get onto Windows. So we know that there's been a lot of comments now that SoundFlow 5 came out, where people asked, is this the one where we got Windows support? And unfortunately, that's not the case yet. But we do try as much we can to make the platform bigger and get more users. And that also would allow us to grow our team and also be able to spend more time on Windows development. So really, it's about us trying to look forward, and hopefully we will get Windows support one day. As we try to say to users, we've started the work, which is to do all the stuff we can do ourselves. But then for the rest of the journey, we really rely on other companies as well to take part in that. And unfortunately, that's a little bit less in our control. So that's a little bit longer answer. But we do feel with you, and I do really want to see SoundFlow on Windows. Of course, that would be great for us as well. So let's hope it comes one day.
Awesome. Okay. Our next question comes from Mike, and he asks, how does SoundFlow work under the hood? Does it need OS services, so it's dependent of an OS like Mac OS, or is it already, well, yeah, we can skip that. We just answered this part. Is it ready to be portable to another OS, which you just answered. But yeah.
So large parts of it are ready, and other large parts are less ready.
Yeah. Awesome. And this question comes from XD on YouTube. And I think that we could expand this question to any DAW. So does SoundFlow work with Reaper?
That's a great question. So for this release, SoundFlow 5, we really wanted to double down on this great deep integration we have with Pro Tools. So a lot of the focus, everything we talk about, is focused on that right now. But that doesn't mean you can't at all use SoundFlow with other DAWs. It just means that you'll get the best experience if you're a Pro Tools user, because that's where we started, 10 years ago. And so a lot of our focus has been there. But some of the core functionality, if you're ready as a user to dive in deeper, and so you would, the whole scale I talked about before, if you're more of a geek, you could absolutely use SoundFlow for pretty much any DAW. So the trigger system Andrew talked about earlier, that actually allows you to intercept and receive MIDI messages, for example. And it also allows you to send MIDI messages out of SoundFlow. So we have composers who use Cubase and Nuendo and Logic, for example, who will use really complicated and advanced workflows where they even remote control Vienna Ensemble Pro over networks via SoundFlow. And they'll have a primary MIDI keyboard, and then to address limitations in those different DAWs. For example, we have a user who converts intercepts all the CC messages, control change messages that they'll receive from a different device, and copies them in whenever you make a note in Cubase, so that all the settings for your virtual instruments would always be set up correctly at the start of any region, no matter how far you jump along in the project. Stuff like that is an extremely complicated setup that we have somebody using Cubase and Nuendo with. We have even got advanced like articulation switchers for film composers. And so yeah, I mean, the answer is absolutely yes. You would also be able to do stuff like that with Reaper. As far as I know, Reaper has pretty advanced scripting possibilities already, and you could probably integrate SoundFlow with that. It's just not been our main focus. So in terms of the really easy to get content, you'll get that for Pro Tools. And we will be slowly expanding that to cover other DAWs as the months and years go by.
And it doesn't even have to just be DAWs. Like we showed really quickly in the store, I wrote a script for the Dolby renderer, the Atmos renderer, because when I deliver an album, I need to take each ADM, open it up in the Dolby renderer, export re-renders so they get the binaural file. I have to export an MP4. And I've automated all that. I can just show it a folder, and it will go through one by one, open up each ADM and export all the stuff that needs to be exported. And it all goes into a folder. So there are, some programs are more automatable than others. And it just depends how much stuff is in the menus, how much stuff is accessible to how they break up their controls, how they expose things. But yeah, there are all kinds of stuff for other programs as well.
Yeah, and just to illustrate on that point, if you go to the store and sort by app here, you'll see plenty of different apps that users have made packages for. And I think one thing to note here is that there's absolutely a difference in quality for all of this stuff. which is why we've started this new effort to really try to highlight the best quality content. So we're not going to go out and say that all of this, like you can remote control all of these apps as easily as you can Pro Tools. That's absolutely not the case. But if you're ready to dive in and to use the forum to learn how this works, you can build amazing stuff. So yeah. And a good place to start is absolutely to go here to the store, sort by app, see if you can find something. And if not, then go to our forum and ask here in the how-to section. It's very easy to just ask a question here, and hopefully somebody can help.
Yeah, and if you're working on a script, there's even a button next to where you're writing your script that says "Get help with this."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I want to show that off.
Yeah, you should. It's really good. The integration into that is really great.
Yeah. So let's say, I mean, you can really, so you'll notice these new red need help buttons. Another thing we didn't cover actually was.
Oh, we didn't even talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the this new effort to guide users who are new to the platform to how to set it up. And so here on this demo account, I've completed all 3 of these flows. The first thing that will happen when you install SoundFlow is you'll run through this quick start guide. So this will always be marked checked. But you can, if something goes wrong, which we have seen a couple of users have issues with when they started SoundFlow 5, you can always click that again here and run through the new quick start guide. You can take our intro tour, which will walk you through all the main functionality of SoundFlow in an hopefully intuitive way so that you can just get to know the basics of where everything is. And so let's just abort that here. And we've even got a tutorial here for learning how to create your first macro. And it will, in the same way, guide you through each of the steps that you need to take. And so this content is still work in progress. The great thing about this platform is that we can add this content even while SoundFlow is out. We don't have to make new versions of SoundFlow to add content here. So hopefully we'll be adding a lot more tutorials over the coming weeks to really improve the the learning experience of SoundFlow. So another way you can get help for anything now in SoundFlow is to hit the F1 key. And so you get this interactive help content search method, which is equivalent to pressing need help here. You'll see that the content is slightly different. And that's because this need help button here actually is quite contextual. So let's say we've created our declick macro here, and I need help with that specific macro. So the good idea is to navigate to it first and then click need help. And then there's going to be this get help with this macro button up in the top. And if I click that, I'm going to be guided through a wizard that will ask you a couple of questions to help us clarify, what did you want this macro to do? That's always a good start so that we understand what went wrong. That requires that we know what it was supposed to do to begin with. And so it will ask you a series of questions. You can walk through here. It will ask you if you're seeing any sort of error. And if you are, it will ask you what that error is, and so on and so forth. So this is the new preferred way to get help with any content that you have in Pro Tools, in SoundFlow or Pro Tools. So if you click here, you'll also see this getting started with SoundFlow, which now includes both our checklists that we already looked at. And if I go back, it also will link to our YouTube playlist, Learning SoundFlow. And so all of this content was already here before, but now we have this streamlined new way of finding it. And again, you can also just click F1. And there's a link to our forum as well to open it in your browser. And then there are also going to be direct links to specific YouTube tutorials as well. Another thing you can do is, let's say you want to learn how to automate DaVinci Resolve. So you could just search DaVinci, and this will immediately search through all of the forum entries relating to that. And so if I just click here, it's going to open up a thread in the forum where Mark Hensley had asked something, and fortunately that request was solved. So yeah, this is a really good way to get help with SoundFlow that is now even more fully integrated into the program.
Awesome. Okay, moving on to our next question. One I want to hit that's important. This is from Alf Holland. He asks if he'll still have all of his macros moving from SoundFlow 4.3.8 to 5.0.
Yes, absolutely. The new version is fully backwards compatible. It is quite a significant update in terms of the underlying mechanisms that need to take place. But there's nothing in your account that we make changes to. It's sort of under the hood automatic migration that happens of the Pro Tools package itself, because previously we relied on built-in functionality, and in the new version it's a package format. Blah blah blah, technical stuff. The short reply is that the upgrade path should be seamless. We've seen a couple of people have issues with that upgrade. So I just want to be transparent about that, and we're fixing those bugs as we see them. So if anybody tries to do the update, they have an issue with it, please report it to us so that we can fix it. But SoundFlow as a platform is designed to be fully backwards and forwards compatible, meaning anything you build in it will continue to work. And of course, whenever that is not the case, it's usually because people built a script for some external software that then changed. So we have no control over that. But the platform itself, it's a core design principle that what you build today will continue to work. So this has been a huge part of the internal work we did for SoundFlow 5 to ensure that. So yeah, it's been really exciting to get all that to work. Yeah, I could talk for days about the technical stuff and that I probably shouldn't.
No. But the thing that I've definitely come to realize is that you are the sort of best big picture person I've ever met, because every question is answered thinking about its ramifications everywhere. So you're never off moving part of the spider web and then someone's wrapped up and dying over there. Everything is always thought about. And if there's a glitch, as you say, it'll get fixed, but nobody's data is getting wiped. Nobody's losing anything. Yeah,
exactly. And and just to ease people's and thanks, Andrew, by the way, for the kind words. Yeah, I mean, we make mistakes as every company does, and this is by far the biggest change to any version we've ever made. And I think we've never really had questions like these before. And I think I understand why they're coming now, because this is quite a significant change to the product. But SoundFlow is designed so that the user always uses the newest version. So we're not force pushing anybody onto 5 yet, but eventually we hope that everybody can be migrated to version 5, because SoundFlow works so closely with the cloud services. So it really needs to work in both ways. And we found several years ago that this was the best solution to the problem of SoundFlow being the middleman between so many other different pieces of software. So Avid has their update schedule, Steinberg has their update schedule, Apple have their own upgrade schedule, and if we had to make a feature matrix in 100 dimensions, essentially, with a dimension for each of the apps we integrate with, it would be virtually impossible to create a combination that worked across all of those. And if we didn't have forwards and backwards compatibility built into SoundFlow, and so we would end up in a situation where users would be forced to use a specific combination of other software just to have SoundFlow working with it. And so this is actually a big part of our whole model as a company, as a business, and how we do software, that the platform itself should be considered something that automatically eventually is updated and always kept in sync with changes to other software, so that your scripts will stay as stable as at all possible. And of course, I mean, changing software is a hugely complicated subject, but we've found that this is the least bad way to deal with it, not just for here and now, not just for the immediate future, but for the really long term.
And I'd like to say that the transition while testing the earlier versions of 5 all the way through have been absolutely fine. And the only thing, if you didn't upgrade, the only thing that would happen is that some newer stuff like Bounce Factory relies on some of what's going on in 5.0. So it won't run in 4.3.8. There's just stuff that can't run. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that it would also, you might be thinking there's all this extra functionality and sort of new user flows and all of this stuff on top. There has been zero performance hit. SoundFlow 5 runs as fast or faster than 438 because so much has gotten optimized under the hood. So yeah, there's no downside I can think of to upgrading at all.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing that I'm saying is like if you're in the middle of a super big important project and you're gonna update 2 minutes before your biggest client comes into the room, I would not advise to do that just
Yeah.
yet because there
Yeah.
are some, smaller things that we're fixing here and there. We're already on version 5.05, so just to be transparent about that. But we fully expect this to be just as stable as version 4.3 in, let's say maximum a couple of weeks from now. And so eventually we'll do that slow rollout of everything to get SoundFlow 5 for everybody eventually. So yeah, by design, nothing is broken. In reality, some few things are sometimes broken, and we intend to fix all of them.
Man,
There's
most
so much to
companies
talk
wouldn't
about,
say that.
Mark.
Kudos. Yes.
These
Yeah,
are really
that's
good
great.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So next one, how can this be incorporated with an S1, S3, or a dock? Pro Tools dock. So these are specifically Avid Pro Tools controllers, control surfaces. So
Right. So those all work using the Yukon protocol internally. And for most of those, I don't own any of them myself. I've never had the pleasure. But from what I know, you can program soft keys on those consoles to simulate keystrokes. And so you could at least theoretically have those keystrokes be simulated, and then SoundFlow would react to those keystrokes if you add a keyboard shortcut in SoundFlow. And that should work. But it is whenever you use multiple keyboard automation software packages on the same computer, due to the way that keyboard simulation and keyboard sort of interception works in macOS, that you can experience conflicts where, in the chain of events, the way that macOS processes this, let's say you've got the keyboard up here, then you've got SoundFlow intercepting those keyboard strokes. And then if, the simulated keystrokes coming from the Avid Yukon soft key integration, if they enter at a later stage in the event queue, then SoundFlow would not receive those. So there is this chicken and egg problem with how when you have something simulating something virtually and something other virtually intercepting stuff, I've heard of issues with that being less stable. And so we do have people who use this. I think I would personally choose to have a Stream Deck on stage instead, or in your own studio. They're really low footprint. Well, you've seen the camera I had of mine, and they just require a USB 2, most of them. Some of the newer ones require USB 3. So there's a little bit of setup to get that if you have like a long USB extension to the machine room, stuff like that. But it's really worth it because you're getting that deep integration where SoundFlow will change the icons behind the screens. So yeah, at the current state of things, I would recommend to get a physical Stream Deck or to use an iPhone. And over Wi-Fi, of course, there's complexity of setting everything up. But to get the best experience, I would recommend using one of those methods.
But
yeah.
I was just going to say, but unless you're you're sending keyboard shortcuts to try and trigger SoundFlow actions from Yukon, there's no conflict at all. I have two S1s in the dock running. I had an S3 before. We know plenty of people running S6s. So yeah, it works alongside them perfectly. They don't necessarily integrate, but they don't really need to. There's no need to have them integrate. Especially
Thanks
if
for
you
clarifying that. Yeah,
I have a good integration.
We had some. I heard some stories of big demos in big rooms where people were sitting with a $100,000 S6 console. I have no idea if that's the price, but at this big venue, and there's this little Stream Deck, and everybody came to watch. What does this one do? I mean, it's just really nice to have that in front of you, together with the power of the big consoles, because they're obviously better at what they do. So with all that being said, it's definitely in our ambition to do a proper integration at one point. That's beyond what I can decide for myself, but it would be great to have them deeper integrated in the future.
One way that they work really well together, the S1 has a little tray to hold an iPad, and you can not put an iPad there, and you can put a Stream Deck there, and it's
Yeah.
the perfect holder. It seriously, that's how I use it. It's actually pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
And we talked about application triggers, but there are also window triggers. So you can have your Stream Deck changed to a deck when you open up the session setup window, or when a certain
Yeah.
plugin opens, or things like that as well. So you can integrate it into your control surface world with automatic triggers and things in a way that's really cool and dynamic.
Yeah, the Stream Deck's it's amazing, and kind of a cheesy little thing, but for Christmas the last 2 years, I bought a couple friends Stream Decks and a little like cash gift card for a subscription to SoundFlow, and been very clear, like the gift is not the Stream Deck, it's time, because of like what they actually get back for it. So I like wrote them a little note about that. But
Nice.
That's nice.
anyway, thanks, Mark's nice Christmas thoughts. Okay. So next question is, I'm going to kind of lump two of these together. So the first one is, can I use SoundFlow with my iPad to control a Pro Tools rig in another studio that does not have SoundFlow on the computer?
No.
Okay.
The way SoundFlow works with the iPads and stuff is quite different from what people have come to expect of touch integrations in the past. And we think to in a better way. I think people are used to Lemur and Touch OC and other solutions where you essentially program the device itself to have the scripts on it, or whatever functionality you have. That means you also have to configure MIDI and OSC routing from that device to whatever other device you want to control. SoundFlow works in a way where the iPad, iOS, or Android app itself is more dumb. It's more like just a container. It's a way to display anything that you can also display elsewhere in SoundFlow. So, for example, the color deck Andrew showed, that runs on macOS, Android, and iOS, and you don't have to do anything to get it on there. You don't have to set up any routing. So you literally just open the free SoundFlow app on iOS, for example, select the Mac that you want to control where SoundFlow is running, and that's it. You have immediate access to all content. There is some advanced scenarios where people are using routers that block some of the traffic with Wi-Fi. That's something we're seeing a couple of user reports on right now. So we want to try to help those people who have complex router configurations. So of course, because we use Wi-Fi or whatever Ethernet connection there is, we're limited by what that allows. Just like any other solution that connects through network. But at least theoretically, it's like you open the SoundFlow app, connect to the server, and that's it.
Yeah.
That also means, because it's stupid, the iPad itself, it's always just a shell for the Mac actually running the scripts. You wouldn't be able to control any Mac that is not running SoundFlow. The only sort of slight change to that is, for example, our Vienna Ensemble Pro integration, as well as our integration with Wise from Audio Kinetic. They actually expose their APIs in a way that we can control them remotely. But as a general case, SoundFlow needs to be run on the Mac that you need to control.
But you can be anywhere on the network that Mac is on and control that Mac. So it's not that you need to be within reach of that Mac.
Right. As long as your network is configured, so like you could be at the other end of the house, or you could potentially probably even connect through some kind of VPN. I'm not sure if that would work, but yeah. I think that hopefully answers it. I actually, to add to that, I just saw Victor Bress had a question on if we're planning to add a USB bridge for iPad and Android. And I think that question actually goes to that issue with, in some studios, you'll have, really advanced networking and firewalls, and you might not be allowed to use the same network on your whatever device you bring as the Macs are on. And so that does pose a problem for how to integrate those systems with each other. And if that happens to you, we often try to work directly with engineers and networking engineers at larger studios to help educate them as to what kind of traffic SoundFlow needs to get allowed. But of course, Victor asks this because if we could just connect via the USB cable somehow, that would be made simpler, because we could bypass any Wi-Fi stuff. And that's definitely on my personal wish list. But I have to say I'm not sure if it's feasible. So it's something we'll have to start researching, because I do think it's a little bit of a limitation. It works really brilliantly when it does, but if you have a complex router set up for any reason, it's a little bit more tricky. In that case, maybe a Stream Deck is the better solution because it's
Yeah.
just USB.
But also, I mean, you have with some of the larger film sound studios done things where people are VPNing into their network and they're being able to use SoundFlow. So these
Yeah,
things are possible, but it's a case by case basis once you get into complex
yeah.
firewalls.
And we do also know that there's, I think it's called the camera kit that you can get that actually turns your regular iPad, iPhone, I don't know what the Lightning
Mm.
think, I think,
Yep.
it's converted into some kind of Ethernet adapter. And that actually works to allow it to use that instead of Wi-Fi. So that may be the best solution here and now. If you aren't able to share the same Wi-Fi, you're going to actually share the same Ethernet as the Mac. And of course, whatever policies of network there are, we can talk about that for years. But as Andrew said, with will, you can sort of you can will it into existence, and we often work with larger companies to fix any issues they might have.
Awesome. Next question is from Enrique, and he asks, is there a way to create a deck that can be copied and pasted from one user to another?
That's another good question. So everything in SoundFlow is built to really emphasize our public community as much as possible. So when you see that we have over 350 packages in the store, it's because by default, any sharing in SoundFlow is public. We really do that so that the open source part of SoundFlow is emphasized. And so what that means is if you're on a SoundFlow Cloud Pro subscription, then you can only share content publicly to the store. And the way that would work is you create your package. Maybe it's for a good integration with Isotope RX9. For example, the one I just showed you was focused on RX8. So I think somebody already built that. They'll, make it look really good, add some beautiful icons to it, and then they'll publish that to the store publicly. If you want to share something privately within a team, we have a different subscription tier that's called SoundFlow Cloud Enterprise, where we support, we allow teams to have private sections of the store. And so, as I mentioned before, part of the reason to not allow any user to share privately is so that we keep stuff happening publicly. We believe it's a good distinction between the tiers to have it set up that way.
Do you want to just show my screen real quick? Because I'll just show. I don't have now. I can't see the video at all. So let me know when it's up.
It's up.
Okay, so but if you're not talking about a facility type thing and you just want to share something you've done, this is the Dolby Atmos batch export thing. So it is basically a package that has one script, that has one default preset that just says, do you want to export MP4s and do you want to export re-renders? But what you can do if you need to share it publicly to get it to somebody else, but you don't want other people seeing your code, you can actually make things closed source and things so that people can't see the code. And to publish it, you just click on the package, click publish package, and it asks you for a version number. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And then it would show up in the store. So if you're really trying to keep it private just between one person and another, I'm going to switch back to the video. So we'll get feedback, disco video party.
Yeah, actually, I mean, so this is one of the situations where Andrew knows a little bit too much. But so currently our policy is that closed source is only allowed for vetted SoundFlow developers like Andrew, because part of the policy that we have security-wise is that you should be able to read any code that you download that is open source. So the closed source option is available for sort of the handpicked members of our developer community,
right?
Because we need, as like if we close the source and you can't read it yourself as a client, we need to be able to say that this is not going to be harmful in any way.
Right. Sorry.
So yeah, just to
there. But if you wrote a script and you just wanted one other person to have it, you can email them the code and they can copy and paste it into a script. I mean, there are lots of sneakernet ways to share stuff
that we don't recommend doing.
Yeah, of course. They're completely not the right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and so what really I think is there we do have a lot of people who share publicly then, and that's the downside of it. And but I would encourage anybody who has questions about how to work in teams to contact us via the chat on our website. So you just go to soundflow.org, and in the bottom right corner there's a chat icon. And so for a lot of these types of questions, we prefer to answer them directly into. We'll ask a bunch of follow-up questions to try to understand the specific
Yeah.
scenario that the user has, because sometimes it may be that the enterprise solution is the best one. Sometimes it may be something different. But we always, like, if you have any questions to this kind, we prefer to take them directly.
Yeah, if it's
Great.
truly proprietary stuff, there are ways that can be worked out.
Absolutely. And we have solutions for like really secure solutions as well, for anything that needs to be secure.
Awesome. Okay, next question. This one comes from Marcos, and he asks, any benefit to using this app for analog gear usage? I mean, the software is nice, but exists one resource that's for analog gear usage. So can you use this with analog? And I kind of have an answer for that.
All right.
So this would be in combination with another tool, but there's a program called Defaulter that runs as an audio suite plugin, and that can help you gain stage your clips. So I've actually done this where I'll have a specific chain that I know about, roundabout, where I like to gain stage that piece. So I'll run Defaulter and it'll clip gain my audio till it reaches a certain RMS level, and then I'm kind of in the ballpark of where I want to be, and then I can tweak from there. You could also use it to assign hardware inserts as well. So those are two things I could think of off the bat when I read the question, but I don't know if you guys have any other ones.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something that Pro Tools can control and it happens to be analog gear, then SoundFlow can absolutely control it because it's somewhere in a plugin, and you have to be specific about what it is you want to do to really answer the question. But obviously, it's not an analog thing, so
Yeah.
it has to be some digital control of your analog workflow. What that workflow is, if you get more specific, we might know specifically if it would do it or not. But
Yeah. One thing I could think of was I think I heard of some people who had SSL rack mixers that can actually be remote controlled via MIDI. And so one thing you could do is, if there's any sort of preset mechanism to control those, you could write a small SoundFlow macro, so you can actually send out SoundFlow MIDI or MIDI via SoundFlow's virtual MIDI interfaces without writing a single line of code. It's fully drag and drop. So you can send, let's say a sequence of CC messages or program change messages, whatever the external device wants. And you could assign that to a macro of complex stuff. Let's say you need to switch 4 presets at the same time, or you could even use it to control like a lighting rig that can receive OSC messages to change the lighting of the stage or something at the same time changing the mute state of something in Pro Tools. Or you could use it to remote control Ableton Live at the same time, just sending media or OSC to that. And in fact, in my office here, the lights in the background are a Philips Hue. So since I'm on my demo account now, I didn't set that up, but I can remote control those. So typically when I do a Zoom interview or something like this, I dim these lights so that I'm not, too dark. And then whenever I'm done and I need more light in the studio for working, I'll just hit a button on my Stream Deck and turn them up again. So I think you can think much more broadly about how this can interact. SoundFlow is an open platform that we want to integrate with as many pieces as possible. Anything you can run in terminal, you could run from SoundFlow as well. So if you have some other way to control the external stuff you want to control, SoundFlow could control that, intermediate thing.
Yeah, and you can run Apple scripts from within SoundFlow. You can, if it's digitally controllable, whether it's analog or not becomes irrelevant. Yes, you can do it. You can send HTTP requests. You can open up WebSockets. Like there's an OBS package, which I use on my webcasts when I'm controlling everything. And I'm running OBS with my Stream Deck through SoundFlow, and that works fine. So, yeah.
I think you have a good point, Christian, too, about kind of expanding what you are thinking about SoundFlow can do, and it's so much more than the DAW. For example, I have these Wi-Fi lights that are made by Elgato, and they're controlled by an app on my computer. So I have a script that if I want to start recording a video, I can open up my recorder software, turn on my lights. If you have Wi-Fi, smart plugs that can be controlled from an app, you could turn on all your analog outboard gear. So you could sit down and say like start, and it could open Pro Tools, open UControl, turn on all your outboard gear. So there's so many other things that are kind of possible outside of the DAW that I think are worth mentioning.
Yeah, and I mean, we even are starting to do integration with Google Chrome and Safari, and so clicking specific buttons in websites. So I mean, and I think it's important to note that some of this is at the bottom end of the spectrum of it requires some low-level scripting and or staying in the forum to ask and learn how this works. But it's absolutely possible to expand all this, and we've got users who share what they do on Instagram with like 5 different iPads and iPhones and 4 Stream Decks. And it looks like a cockpit, and everything is connected to each other. And it's wonderful to see people really push the boundaries of this. So I encourage anybody who's interested in figuring out what can you actually do with SoundFlow to check us out on Instagram. There's a lot of user-made content there.
Great. Okay, so maybe a couple more questions. How are you on time? You want to?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so couple people have asked, is it Apple Silicon native, or does it require Rosetta?
Right.
Or
It currently uses Rosetta for a couple of the core components. We are building SoundFlow on M1 now, so that's the first step. Is one of the important steps in transitioning completely to natively run there. We have been waiting on several third-party companies to get ready with their part before it really made sense for us to start diving more into it. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to fully natively run there. With that being said, we're hosting this live stream through my MacBook Air M1 first generation that I bought as soon as they came out because we needed to support SoundFlow on them. Half of the software I'm using right now during the stream is running through Rosetta, and a lot of it runs faster than on my 32 core AMD machine that I had before. So it's a valid question, and we will support it natively eventually. But right now, it doesn't have much of direct impact on anything performance wise.
Great. Okay.
And we'll keep this updated on the system requirements page we have.
Awesome. One person wants the stream to stop so they can go play with SoundFlow.
Okay. Yeah.
Joe asks, when connecting to SoundFlow on an iPad, all of the installed decks are shown. Is there a way to organize or hide decks that you don't want to see?
Right. This is one of the things that I knew would happen, and we just sort of a little bit ran out of time. Or currently, there's no good way to fix that issue with the home screen on, which is sort of what comes out when you open the SoundFlow app on an iPad or iPhone or Android device. First, you get to choose between the servers on the network running SoundFlow. So if you're just at home, there's just going to be a single icon. And then after that, you'll be presented with all the decks and surfaces that are in your account. And now with the official Pro Tools package coming out, that's now a lot. And we know that's annoying. Currently, that needs an update to our mobile app. And we want to do an iteration of that where we not only address that issue, but several other, make other improvements to that app. But because of the nature of the version 5 that came out, which is so big, I didn't want to update both apps at the same time this time around to keep things a little bit more bug-free. So we will be making improvements and changes to that eventually. But for now, the workaround would be to not use that home screen at all and just go build your own home deck and maybe label it something with some spaces in the beginning or something that brings it to the top left. You can even you can actually trigger it from a keyboard shortcut that controls what the iPad will show. So there are several ways to sort of get past that home screen, which is annoying. And so you could build your own home deck that just has links to the decks that you like. And then if for those decks you add a back button using our new feature to navigate to the previous deck, you can spend 99% of your time not worrying about that issue because you've worked around it. That being said, we do know that it's something we need to fix eventually.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see here. So there's a question from Enrique about what's the best way to organize the assets, package, macros, decks. Do you put it all the macros associated with the deck on the same package, or do you have one package for all your decks and one package for all your macros? So probably just tips on organizing your SoundFlow life.
I'm so happy that question's coming. So let me share my screen here, because that is something that I think I've not communicated correctly before, or may have made more confusing than it needs to be. So an important new feature we have in SoundFlow 5 is the ability to make package folders. So a package folder is essentially a way to structure content within your package. So if I do that here, let's say I make a package folder called apps. You'll see that it pops up here. Now I could drag and drop all of my macros that just open apps into that here. So now when I navigate to it, they're there, but they're gone from sort of the root of the package. And I could add as many folders as I want, and they could be nested as well. So now I could create another folder for the decks and just move those in there. And so whenever you move content within a package, it's just a very simple operation. It is no bad side effects in any way. And the reason why I mentioned that is if you not do that, if you move stuff between packages, there are side effects. The reason for this is packages are really thought of as deployment units. It's a little bit technical, but the point is a package is something that you either have for yourself, like in this case, our default package, or it's something that you build with the intention to share later. So a good way to separate your stuff from each other is to use the default package or any one package that you have as this is the stuff where you keep everything that you need privately and are not intending to share at any point. And so you'll just organize it like this, and you can have any folder structure that you want within that package. As I said, you can move stuff around. It has no effect. But watch what happens if let's say I move my demo deck to the StreamYard package. It will now give me a warning because, as it says here, this might break references to this command from other scripts or decks. So I'm not going to do that right now. And the reason for why that happens is that anything that you reference within a package has sort of a relative reference on how to find that other content within the package. So the moment that you move it to a different package, it no longer will know how to find that. And this can be a problem if you need to restructure a very large section of what you've built. So I don't necessarily recommend people to completely redesign how they did all this stuff if they already have hundreds of macros built. But it's a good idea to think of going forward that you should keep anything related to each other in the same package if it's something you intend to share. And but anything you share, there's another rule, which is that it needs to only refer to content within the package. So that's why we call it a deployment unit. So for example, the whole Pro Tools ecosystem here, that is one self-contained package. And these decks have references to other content within the package, but they don't contain references to stuff outside of the package. So the short reply is use package folders for organization to make things easier to find, but think of a package as something that is either private for yourself or something that you intend to deploy or publish. And if it's something you intend to publish, whatever is in that package should be entirely self-contained. So imagine in the store, if I install Barry Weir's Isotope RX8 kit, all the 17 macros in that should be only using content from within that package. Imagine if it weren't like that, then whenever you install a package, it would need to install all sorts of other dependencies and packages that he would have used. So to keep things simple, a package needs to be entirely self-contained when you deploy it. Anything you build privately can contain references to other packages. I hope it makes sense. I know it's a little bit technical, and in fact, it's something that I want to improve in the future to make it clearer what is a private package, what is something that you want to publish. In this case, I built a StreamYard package because for this demo, actually, to remote control a couple of things. But that could have just as easily been built in my default package. Now, if I intend to publish this at one point, it would work better as a separate package. So that's really how to think about these new features.
Just like you would want to keep your audio files in a Pro Tools session folder.
Yeah, and a little bit like you. I mean, if you're building a project for one client and a project for another client, you wouldn't want those to refer to each other. So when one customer requests a change, you wouldn't want all the other customers to have their projects change as well. So yeah, packages are very separate from each other that way.
Cool, great. Okay, let me see here. And okay, so just a very quick yes. Ben asks, hold on, oops. Ben asks, I have an Anubis audio interface and I control it from the Safari browser as well. Can I use SoundFlow to make shortcuts for it?
Sorry, I was reading an internal comment here. Can you say it again?
Oh, no problem. I have an Anubis audio interface and I control it also from the Safari browser. Can I use SoundFlow to make shortcuts for it?
Yeah, interesting that you can control that from Safari. You can in fact do quite advanced things to. So both Safari and Chrome originate from something called WebKit, which is still the rendering engine being used in Safari. And SoundFlow can sort of send JavaScript, like browser JavaScript, into the browser and execute it there. It takes a little bit to set up, but that is incredibly powerful because it allows you to create really complex functionality, like to actually find the correct type of content within a website and click it. The downside being it's really complex to write the scripts for it as well. So for something like that, it would be a really good question to ask in our forum. And we really love to do script and macro help there because it allows the conversation to be started. Maybe there are other people who are using that audio interface as well. It might be that the simpler approach is if it also supports being controlled by MIDI or OSC, that's probably easier to program. And so the whole conversation starts, you already know that you can do it via Safari. So that's one option. And the first step of the process is clarifying what's the easiest way to do it, what's the most stable approach. And then we or members of the community will chime in with possible solutions.
Great. Okay. Here's one for you from Kenneth Wright, who claims in our chat room all the time that he is living on Saturn. So I think that his question is about building a spaceship. He would like to know the maximum amount of devices that he can connect to SoundFlow at the same time.
We don't have any limit, but we haven't tested with 5,000 devices either. So yeah, I mean, I've seen spaceship looking setups for sure.
Yeah.
A few specific ones come to mind, but I think I would go to the Instagram profile to really see some inspiration. But we don't enforce any artificial limits on it, so it would probably just be limited by whatever your computer can handle.
And it's also really responsive. Like that offset counter, which was running a bit sluggishly because we're video conferencing. When I'm not video conferencing, when I was testing it, I think I had 25 of them all running on either different screens on my Mac or 3 iPads and a phone and 2 Android tablets, like everything in the house. And they were all running and they were all fine. Nice. So the overhead, you would think you would get to the point where you'd really be bogging stuff down. And they're just, and this is on an iMac Pro. It's not on, anything that new. So yeah, it's, you probably would run out of devices before you'd run out of the number you could hook up.
Yeah. And if you're using Stream Decks, the main limitation is the power delivery that the hubs can give them. They're quite power hungry. So I did end up with, I mean, my MacBook Air here, the main limit that I experienced was actually the hubs that could control USB. So there's the camera and there's the phone and the Stream Deck and all the other, peripherals, extra screens and stuff like that. That's more of a limitation than SoundFlow would ever be in that case.
Awesome.
Mm.
Cool. Probably be useful to know how it works on Saturn as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get SpaceX on board at some point with some.
Yes. Okay. So let's see. I've got one question for you privately, Christian, if you want to check that in the chat. And then another one that we should hit, maybe these last couple here. So this is from Keith. And Keith would like to know, what is the process to start working with an application that does not have packages built in? Do you have any quick tips for building out workflows or macros?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We recently had people, I mean, we get support requests from different channels, and we try to always direct questions like these to the forum because it's as I said before, it starts a conversation. So we had some people reaching out about UAD Luna. And I think that's a great example. It's fairly new software, and they were really excited to see, is this something we can build something with? And I redirected some of those people to the forum. They started a thread, and eventually found each other in that thread and started finding workarounds and workflows and what is possible currently. What can we? Is there anything the SoundFlow team can do to help? Can we get in touch with other software vendors? And that's not. It's just a random product I'm picking out here that I just remembered, but this has been the case for a lot of other apps in the past, and that's a great way to contribute. Anybody who has direct relationships with maybe beta teams or other direct relationships with other software vendors, I'm always keen to hear from them, because sometimes maybe the best solution is for us to get involved and build a native integration. So there's this whole spectrum of things that you can do, but it all starts with getting all the best minds together, finding out how many are there in the community who want this. We've also started some threads, for example, on Logic, which is, would be a good example of something we should expand into supporting. And so we started a thread where we asked everybody to contribute ideas for what would you want for Logic support. And the moment that has started, you'll see, well, there are actually already quite a few people who use Logic with SoundFlow and have already found solutions. And then this new community within the community starts building. And that really allows us in SoundFlow to say, okay, this is something we should really look into adding support for. So yeah, the forum is the best location to start it. And, it will also help you see if anybody has not maybe created a store package yet for it, but they may have some private scripts or other content they want to share.
And they're people who have written stuff for themselves that don't realize anyone else would even want it. And once the discussion starts in the forum, they'll either be pasting their scripts or they'll publish packages. And then all of a sudden you really get great interaction going.
Yeah. And I mean, Andrew, you know this. It's not fun to write. I mean, that's not true. It's always fun to write software, but it's even more fun when somebody uses it. And that's, I think, the exact case. You'll see the staff picks we showed earlier with Chris Shaw's track data utilities, your Melodyne helpers and stuff like that. Even though you get nothing out of it, money wise or anything to support it, it feels good to support it because you're seeing users use it every day in what they do, and so it becomes this duality of the person making something and seeing the benefits of others, and that was always a big part of the community, that we wanted users to be able to share with each other that way.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the story of why you can't share privately as easily, because we want to foster this. It's really important that it keeps being open like that.
Yeah. And I think even if you feel as though you don't really want to share stuff, once you see how much stuff is getting shared on the forums already, like I got over myself. And that's why Melodyne Helpers is just out there and it's free and it's all fine, because it is that that sort of community. And if you're a bit of a geek and you've got the demo, or if you haven't even gotten the demo of SoundFlow yet, and you're just curious about a particular program, would you be able to control it? One of the tests for it, without having to know too much, is if you get the accessibility inspector, which is a utility on Mac, or if you've got SoundFlow, there are lots of macro things like click on UI element or something that has a pick, or if you're in a script, there's a pick button. Just roll your mouse around on the interface of the program, and if it highlights individual things, you can script the hell out of it. If it all shows up as one big red blob, it's going to be more difficult, but you can still do it.
That's a really good point. I think we've talked so much about like what can you do, what can't you do, and it just comes down to some of the apps are easy for us to do support for because of the way that they're built. Some of them are really hard, and I'm not going to mention a lot of names of those, but we know them internally, and that also means in the planning of what we can release and when we will release it, more official support. It's to a large extent. It comes down to what is easy and natural for us to build in a way where it will be of a high quality, and those will come first. But if you have something specific, please let us know. We have a lot of mailing lists and internal notes that we take to gauge where all the interest is. So if all of a sudden a lot of users wanted a very specific app we hadn't heard about before, by all means, let us know. By using the website chat is the best way to do it.
And if you've got a program that you do this inspection on, either with SoundFlow or Accessibility Inspector, and it just shows up as one big blob, one of the things is that's not just the way SoundFlow would deal with it. It's accessibility. So it's anybody with vision problems who's trying to use a computer. So if you have any sort of relationship with the company, you can just email them and say, why do you hate blind people? And make them feel bad and make their app more accessible. I mean, you never know. Some people, especially if it's a little utility app that you use every day, but you just wish you could script it easily or something like that, it might not be a big deal for them to make some of these buttons accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're seeing some good developments around the industry. I mean, I can talk about all this technical detail for hours, of course, but there's a lot of plugins that use something called Juice as the framework for how they're written. It's open source and fairly inexpensive for vendors to get started with, which means almost all of the smaller plugin vendors use Juice. And from version 6.1 of that platform or framework, they added built-in accessibility support. And that will, as those vendors get updated their version of Juice that they build their plugins with, when those new versions start coming out, we're going to get a lot more automatic support of controlling specific things there. So, it's one thing is sort of how are things right now? Other things are, can we impact that as a company? I would love for SoundFlow to become important enough that people listen to us, and you can help with that, the users, by using it, of course, and spreading the word. And the more that this becomes the standard for how you do automation in any creative industry, it's something we can go to those companies and say, one way would be to say, why do you hate blind people? But the other would be for us to try to build that relationship and see, is there an easy way for us to make a better integration?
Yeah, if you want to be positive about it, whatever.
That's why he's the CEO.
Yeah,
He's got a very CEO
This
answer.
is why
for
I
it.
do not work in public relations.
Well, sometimes you need to push in both directions at the same time. So
Yeah,
it's all good.
absolutely.
Awesome. On that note, I think we've hit it.
we're good, Christian. This has been amazing. I still cannot say your last name properly, so I am not going to try. But I do want to point out, I mean, 5.0 is such a huge release and so much has changed. But I've only been, I think it's slightly under 2 years, or maybe it's exactly 2 years that I've been using SoundFlow. And just in those 2 years, not just the 5.0 upgrade, the advances, and it's sort of incredible because it was amazing when I started, and now it's just like insane. It's so good.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being part of the journey. I will never forget how it was to get you on board. And I heard a rumor, Andrew Scheps started using SoundFlow, and I had to, get off my whatever I was doing and take a look at an internal forum where it was happening. And you went from, being the the newest kid on the block to becoming the fastest learning JavaScript ninja in, I think, 2 weeks or something.
And every time I think I'm getting good, I realize how much I don't know. But yeah, I mean, to be able to build this stuff, and that is the point. It's not like I had to study for years and years to get to the point of building apps, and anyone can build these. I'm using the same tools. I've got the same editor as everybody else. There's no like special developer package or whatever. This is all what's built
Also
into
got the same
SoundFlow.
plugins as everybody else.
Hey. I do have the same plugins as everybody else.
Yeah.
I might have a few more of them, but that's not.
It's all in the beard, right? That's what.
Yeah, it's
how it
all.
goes.
No, the beard is just full of food. That's all. Just saving stuff for later. So I think on that note, we really should start wrapping it up. I think it's about beer o'clock. So Christian, thank you so much for this, and
Thank you, Tim.
absolutely just go on the forum and post and there's a 30-day trial. Get the trial. There's no reason not to. Most of the stuff that's in the store is free, so you can use it during your trial, no problem. And then just a quick program note, as they say here, we're not happening next week because I will be at some studio in London or other shooting some videos, unless there's some big plague outbreak or a big fire, something crazy. But yeah, so we're not here next week. And then join me on Valentine's Day for my date with Mick Gazowski, because that should be fun. He is a fun individual. So
yeah, absolutely. He brought props last time he was on a stream with us. So it's a big day.
I look forward to that.
Cool.
All right. Well, it was great chatting with you guys. Thanks so much for allowing me to come on and to show all this crazy stuff out. And thanks for being part of the journey. And Mark, thank you so much for being part of this as well with Pure Mix, and everybody in the audience for supplying really, really good questions. I really enjoyed that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
cool.
Great.
Thanks for saving hours of our lives. So
all right.
Yeah.
So now normally I would say we switch to the thanks for watching and mute the microphones and do it really awkwardly. But now Christian has to do it.
Yeah.
Should we count? I'm gonna do it. All right.
You do it. You just do it. I'm just gonna keep talking and you cut me off.
Okay.
That's the way I do it.
I can't scroll you down slowly, so it's gonna
no, just cut me off.
All right.
Right off.
Thanks everybody. Cheers.